After being hit by a truck, Chuliang wakes up in a world of cultivation, flying swords, and bloodthirsty demons. Reborn in the body of a dead disciple, he has no choice but to survive in a world where one mistake means death. As he grows stronger, every mission throws him against even deadlier monsters hiding among humans. One demon after another falls beneath his blade, bringing him closer to the truth behind this dangerous world. Can an ordinary man from Earth become the greatest demon slayer in the cultivation world? It was an ordinary evening, but it seemed our protagonist, Chuliang, had something brewing tonight. The maids escorted him to the room of their best concubine and left so as not to disturb him. He entered her room and greeted her with a smile, after which a girlish laughter was heard from behind the tulle covering the bed. She said that he seemed quite interesting. She was informed that he wanted to see her sleepy and disheveled since he liked it better that way. Initially, she thought of him as a rude man who liked to intimidate others, but he showed respect to her even before he saw her. She feels much calmer this way, and he also wanted to see natural makeup on her face, so she did not apply too much. She came out from behind the curtain and smiled and remarked that he was so handsome. Her name is Yin Yenhun, and she's glad to meet him. His gaze fell on her charms, and he awkwardly noted that her name sounded so elegant, which made her laugh and say that everything was just the way he liked it. She came up to him deliberately and pressed herself closer to him, saying that he was a little nervous. Was this his first time in a place like this? He answered her that, in fact, the elders forbade him to come here because he was too young, and she leaned towards him with interest, asking how old he was. He told her that he was only 17, and she laughed, noting that he had not even reached adulthood. To others, he might still seem like a child. But with her, he would no longer be one after the time spent here. He laughed awkwardly and said that he had tried before, but not with such experienced women. And in general, it was the first time he had seen such dimensions on someone. She noted that he was a naughty little boy. She would teach a lesson to the lover of mocking the innocent. He awkwardly said that he meant that he lacked experience in some things. He hoped that she would not shame him for it. She immediately walked away from him and said that it was so annoying. She always gives her all, but he seemed to be too nervous. She poured him a glass of alcohol to help him relax a little and said that once he drank it, she would do everything to ensure that he could have an unforgettable experience. He was very excited about this thought, and then his mood suddenly changed. He approached her with a gloomy expression and said, "As for an unforgettable experience, that's impossible. But he promises that she will have an incredible experience." She spilled everything in surprise and let out a nervous laugh, noticing that he was too self-confident. He thinks he can impress her. He slapped his chest and declared with defeat that maybe his skills are not yet at the level he would like, but he can compensate for everything with props. She was even a little surprised. She had no experience at all in such things and therefore considered him a strange guy, but she did not refuse the client. She smiled awkwardly and thought that usually people come and immediately pounce on her. They know their goal, but he is somehow strange. Perhaps this kid is much more interesting than she thinks. He intrigued her greatly, and she said that she cannot believe that the young master is playing with her. What kind of props did he bring with him? She wants to take a quick look at it. She got too close to him, which made him nervous. And then he put his hand in his pants and started rummaging around there looking for props. After which, he took out a huge gold bar and loudly put it on the table. The girl was shocked. She indignantly pointed her finger at it and exclaimed, "How will they use something so big? Are they going to have some kind of game? She will not agree to this." He thought for a moment and asked, "Does the beautiful lady not want to use such props?" She indignantly exclaimed that no one would agree to such a thing. And then he suddenly pointed out the window, saying that someone was flying there, and she turned around. Then he grabbed an ingot from the table and hit her on the head with all his might, after which the top of her head began to smoke and burst into green flames, and her face suddenly became somehow angry. She exclaimed, "How dare he fool her? In that case, there's no point in pretending anymore." Her body suddenly grew in size, spider legs grew, and another face on her abdomen, and she exclaimed that today they were convinced that he is small scoundrel who attacks from behind. The woman really was a demon. In response to this, MC only smiled and said that there was no lie in his words. He really came here for the first time to exorcise a demon, and the spider girl is the biggest monster he's ever met. And she even let him use the props. She furiously called him an idiot. His words made no sense and pounced on him, vowing to tear him to pieces. He used his energy. His appearance changed, and he said she was wrong. Had she heard of the swordsman cultivators from Mount Shu? Someone risked their life to report a monster disguised as a human in a pleasure house that was causing harm to others. He received orders from the sect to kill the demon and eradicate the evil. His name is Chu Liang. He's a disciple of the Mount Shu sect, and he's here to kill her. She became flustered and exclaimed, "What the hell was he doing here? He came in his finery, but now he can't escape her." She attacked and suddenly remembered something about the Mount Shu sect. This sect specializes in studying demon extermination techniques, and then she realized she was in big trouble. It seemed her only option to buy herself some time was to lure him into a trap. She threw a web at him and rushed to the window, but he asked, "Does this flimsy web really think it can stop him?" He waved his hand and sent his sword flying, pierced the web and pierced her chest. And as her spirit left her body, she thought she spent hundreds of years cultivating to achieve this form, and not even a year had passed since she set foot on human lands. Is this really how it will end? She collapsed, her body piercing several floors and nearly crushing the rest of the workers and visitors of the pleasure house, causing the people to flee in panic. Seeing the body of the monster, they immediately rushed to report it. And one of the visitors, noticing a pile of skeletons under the collapsed floor, asked in horror how many human lives she took to take this form. After the death of her body, her spirit flew out of her mouth and rushed upward. One of the visitors exclaimed that he would never appear here again and promised to walk his concubine home. And the spirit of that spider had already overcome several floors, and she thought, why hasn't she died yet? Why can she fly? Even though her form had disappeared, she was still alive. And then she suddenly saw Liang. He said that he had had to wait for her for a long time. She was very scared and thought, does he really want to absorb her? This is so terrible. As soon as he touched her spirit, it dissolved, and he exhaled with a smile. Now the reward for capturing the demon is guaranteed to him. The fight with this demon had tired him out so much. The spider is very skilled at creating illusions, so it took him a long time to find her. The brick that casts a spell on a demon reveals its true form upon impact. Fortunately, he obtained it in the White Tower. With this treasure, capturing demons now happens much faster. Now that he has the spider's demonic soul, he can begin his favorite part. He concentrated and moved to the meditation room to the White Tower. He headed towards it and thought that every time he was as nervous as the first. Entering the first floor, he found himself in a completely different space where cages for the demons he had captured were located on floating islands. He was able to collect the demon soul through third realm cultivation. Now he was curious what he would get after working on it. He approached the spider's cage and thought that last time, even a small demon soul could turn into a weapon like the ceiling brick. But now he should get something even more valuable. He nervously swallowed, pulled himself together, and pressed the button. The spider's spirit ignited and dissolved, transforming into a weapon, a demon-binding rope. When used, this rope could absorb the true chi of enemies, automatically and tightly binding the enemy, rendering them unable to fight. This would destroy the demon's mental state without even revealing its form. MC imagined how this rope would work in action, and he felt uneasy. But with the brick and this rope, capturing evil would be even faster. And then in high spirits, he left the tower. Suddenly, he heard a noise outside, closed his eyes, and quickly returned to reality. He saw a paper crane fluttering against his finger, informing him that a letter from the sect had arrived. He tore the paper crane apart and opened the letter, which stated that the teacher had a very important matter for him, and he must figure out how to proceed. And judging by the 3 urgent notes, this matter is truly urgent. Liang felt uneasy. The master, who had been drinking non-stop for 12 hours and was absorbed in reading, lying on the floor without wine or books, could write so many words at once. He had a bad feeling about this. He left the pleasure house. The workers tearfully thanked him for defeating the demon, but they were very sad because now the house would suffer huge losses in repairs. He awkwardly said goodbye to them and thought, in the process of fighting demons, of course, unforeseen circumstances can arise, but it has nothing to do with him. Besides, the teacher wants to see him, so he can't hesitate. He returned to the territory of Mount Shu. Guards met him in the sky, and as soon as he showed them the pass, he entered the sect territory without hindrance and immediately headed to his teacher's residence. He excitedly opened the doors, asking her what happened. But seeing that she was drinking again and simply lying on the bed, he only sighed heavily. She should have paid attention to her appearance, but it didn't matter. She was still drunk. Some time ago, while he was heading to the sect and looking at the mountainous expanses, clouds, and floating islands, he wondered how much time had passed. He didn't even realize that he had been in this world for more than half a year. And yet, just 6 months ago he was an ordinary high school graduate in China. Before coming here, he went down to the first floor where their family restaurant was located, quickly put on his shoes, and his mother asked where the best student in their province was going at such an early hour. He asked her not to tease him. After all, the entrance exam results have come out yesterday, so he wanted to hang out with his friends today. She told him to be careful, and he ran out into the street. But at the end, he turned to her and said that he had a class reunion today, so she shouldn't expect him for dinner. And at that very moment, a huge truck hit him, and he fell into another dimension. He had no idea that one car accident would change everything, and that his mother would never wait for him again. What's even more terrifying is that his soul was transferred to a bizarre world different from theirs. Demons and ghosts run rampant here, and the power of gods and spirits has a huge impact. Thanks to the immortal sects of the 9 heavens and 10 lands, peace and order are maintained. And thanks to that idiot driver, he ended up here. And he arrived at the very moment when D. Nufing's disciple was making a breakthrough, but with great misfortune. MC's soul headed straight for him. He closed his eyes thinking that he was about to fall and die, but he infused himself into that disciple's body, which immediately brought him back to life. And then something happened. The system activated, and there he was in his body. Realizing this, he was very surprised and thought, is this an intersection of souls? He didn't kill the original owner of the body, did he? But this is all nonsense. How could such a huge truck accelerate next to his house in a small alley? How much kinetic energy would it take to travel through time and space? Was that truck really faster than the speed of light? Was it a space jump, or did he crash into it on purpose so that he would end up here? He was very angry. Suddenly, something was thrown at him, and he felt a sharp pain in his head, and memories of the body's previous owner came flooding back. It turns out his family was killed by demons when he was very young. That day, the entire neighborhood was engulfed in fire, and he was hiding on a beam under the ceiling. The demon walked through the building and scoured its eyes for the boy. And when it finally found him, it suddenly approached him and opened its mouth, which scared the little boy greatly. The demon opened its mouth wide, getting ready to devour him, and said that this little meat looks so delicious. He can't hold back anymore. It must taste even better. The boy was terrified. He froze in fear and was already preparing for his death, but then a beautiful woman appeared and saved him, his future teacher. She extended her hand to him and told him not to be afraid, then patted his head and said she wouldn't hurt him. This made him cry even harder. She smiled awkwardly, not knowing how to calm him down, and said he was safe now. But the more she tried to calm him down, the more he cried. And then she pinched his cheek and said she saw he had good cultivation abilities and invited him to join her in the sect. The boy immediately stopped crying and looked at her resolutely. From then on, he began his cultivation with his teacher. He had been disciplined since childhood, but at one point he realized that even his teacher couldn't help him on the path of cultivation. One day, Nufing left, and as he said goodbye, he asked her to be careful and that he would train diligently and return to saturating his chi. The boy didn't give himself any rest, trying to quickly gain divine powers and descend from the mountain to eradicate evil and kill demons. He was too hasty in his cultivation, and because of this, his heart became unstable. He couldn't control his rage. As a result, the breakthrough failed and his soul dispersed. And at that moment, the fusion occurred. So thank God, it wasn't Leon who killed the original owner of the body. At first, he sighed with relief, but then he realized that this was the demon world. The scene of this boy's parents being killed by demons was firmly imprinted in his mind, after which he developed a trauma. But he was in China, so he understood that fear arose from a lack of power, so he just needed to become stronger. He continued cultivating and ended up in the Shu Mountain sect, one of the best in this world. And for a start, everything was quite good. And after the transformation, he realized that some changes were happening inside him. This white tower didn't exist in the previous owner's memory. It appeared with him. Upon entering, he felt his mind fill with a wealth of knowledge. For example, he learned that after killing demons, the tower rewards treasures, but then everything became a jumble. He was shocked. So much information at once was clearly too much. He barely remembered the one main rule of the mysterious tower: kill demons, enter the white tower, cultivate, and receive a reward. At first, he didn't even want to look for major demons. He first searched a village near Mount Shu to find burials and tombstones and killed several lantern ghosts. A lantern ghost is a type of ghost formed from the grudge of a deceased person, which attaches to a lantern and transforms into a ghostly flame. At night, it collides with living people. After hitting, the ghost disappears, and the person it hits becomes seriously ill at best. As for cultivators, nothing will happen to them. The lantern is powerless against them. She's so helpless, it's actually cute. The reward for refining the ghost lantern is a chi-gathering pill, which greatly aids cultivation. It's not particularly rare, but in large quantities, it increases cultivation speed. For example, he once encountered a stone spirit statue that was doing absolutely God knows what, and in a tough battle, he used these very pills, which saved him. He also crushed the spirit into pieces. After refining the stone statue's spirit, the White Tower presented him with a gift, a chest containing a magical treasure. Inside was a demon-revealing brick. If you hit someone on the head with this demon, it will reveal its true form. If it's not a disguised demon, you'll feel pain and dizziness. Pills, magical treasures, divine skills, all these are incredibly important things in the world of cultivators. Disciples on the mountain must complete special tasks for the sect before gaining access to resources and treasures, and all he had to do was kill demons. And as his strength increases, the quality of his treasures, the strengthening of his spirit, and his might will increase. He's having a hard time right now. He kills demons because he's afraid of them. For the first time, he freed himself from panic and anxiety after descending to the human world. Ironically, after the soul's transmigration, he fulfills the wish of the body's original owner. Now back to the present. The Silver Sword sect at the peak of Mount Shu. He landed at the main hall, entered, and thought that his master had simply written him a huge message. It seemed the matter was truly serious. Before entering her residence, he paused and combed his hair. Once he was ready, he entered her room and said that he had finally returned. In the letter, she wrote that the matter was urgent. Nufeng was drunk as usual, lying on the bed, hugging a jug of alcohol. She was his teacher and also the master of the Silver Sword Peak. Finally getting up, she rubbed her eyes and said it was already dawn, and then she saw her disciple and asked what he was doing here. He frowned and said, but she sent him a letter telling him to urgently return to the sect. She asked, is that true? Her head instantly cleared, and she remembered what had happened. Yesterday, the leader called the masters to a meeting, saying he wanted to prepare for the ascent of Mount Shu, which happens once every 10 years. He understands what this means, right? Disciples from different mountain peaks participate in the selection of the leader. At the meeting, everyone was arguing, but she didn't seem to care. But when Wang Xuanling started speaking, she couldn't stand his arrogance anymore. She stood up and imitated him, arrogantly stroking his beard, and said, he mumbled something about the title of head disciple of Mount Shu, that this title should be held by one of his subordinates. She sat in anger and exclaimed, does this old man really think that among the 36 peaks of Mount Shu, only his Jade Peak is considered the best? She disagreed with him. An argument ensued and then a bet. If the disciple of the Jade Peak wins, she will give him the Phoenix Spirit. But if the disciple for Silver Sword Peak receives this title, the old man will yield to her the position of head of all the peaks. MC smiled nervously, already understanding what she was getting at, and she said that's why she wanted to ask him which disciple they could send, and be sure he wouldn't lose face. Liang smiled nervously and reminded her that they only had one disciple at their peak, and that was him. She clapped her hands joyfully and said, that's wonderful. He's such a smart boy. He decided to volunteer, and she's so pleased with her disciple. MC thought he's just reached the early stage of the third realm. How can he compete with someone who has the fourth and fifth? He became very nervous and reminded her that Master Yu Jinfeng's faction is the most influential with nearly 100 disciples. There are many outstanding individuals in the Golden Core realm, and they have every chance of becoming the top disciple. As for him, he only recently reached the realm of spiritual intent. He felt uneasy about what the teacher would think of him. The position of head disciple represents the face of each generation of Mount Shu, so there will be competition. That's for sure. As for the leader, he is the most powerful person among the 36 peaks. If none of the 4 elders of the major mountain cities can become the sect leader, the leader of the peaks will become the leading candidate for the next head. The teacher wants him, a weak disciple, to compete for the position of head, so he will have to really fight. Empress Feng, the threat of Mount Shu, as the teachers call him. She is known throughout all the rivers and lakes for her fondness for alcohol, martial skills, and peculiar character. She decisively claimed the position of supreme leader due to her outstanding cultivation, but the head of Mount Shu was always afraid to entrust her disciples, fearing that she might mislead them. In the end, she descended from the mountain, rescued the talented Shu Liang, and no one could hold anything against her. Perhaps she realized that training is hard work, which is why she did not take on a second disciple. Upon closer analysis, the master's logic defies explanation. His teacher patted him on the shoulder and said with a smile that he had at least 6 more months to prepare. If he achieved the rank, she would treat him with even more respect. His teacher's courage truly impressed him. She was risking the only treasure of their peak against others. She also promised him to do whatever he wanted if she became the supreme leader. MC had been staring at her pendant and remained silent this entire time, causing her to become angry and exclaim that he was too insolent. He dared to contradict her. He excitedly exclaimed that it was just a misunderstanding and asked her to listen to him. He wanted to say that since she had put the precious phoenix spirit jade on the line, he would do everything in his power. However, there are some difficulties, and if he fails, he hopes she won't blame him. She smiled awkwardly and asked, so he wasn't looking at the pendant. She immediately apologized to him and cleared her throat, telling him to try his best. If he becomes the chief disciple and she becomes the supreme leader, they will receive a lot of resources and split them 70-30. Isn't that wonderful? She clapped her hands joyfully and headed to her bed, chuckling contentedly, while Leon walked towards the exit of the main building, and the laughter continued. He sighed heavily, summoned his sword, and thought, is it possible to increase his strength enough in half a year to compete for a title? He now has both treasures and a tower. Now he can complete quests and destroy demons on his own, so he will try his best. Now he needs to go to the exchange pavilion to report on the completed task. In the sect, disciples obtain resources for cultivation through the distribution of missions in the exchange pavilion. The city soon came into view. Beneath the Supreme Palace, there are many important passages for sect members, and the Sword Exchange Pavilion is located here. This name comes from the sword-shaped coins used within Shushan. He entered the pavilion, collected his reward, and happily continued on his way. In the cultivation world, the value of elixirs, talismans, and treasures cannot be measured in ordinary gold and silver. The accepted currency is spiritual stones. In the Shu sect, this is also due to the use of spiritual stones. Initially, they were broken into 2 round pieces called manta due to their shape, but they were easily counterfeited. So they were later replaced with more refined coins, butterfly coins. Currently, sword coins are used containing a unique aura. He went to the 2nd floor of the pavilion where he can receive new missions. Higher-ranking leaders and elders also reside here. They facilitate the resolution of complex problems. To avoid attracting the attention of the infamous Nufeng who causes nothing but trouble, the elders show some favoritism toward the only talent at her peak. He peeked into Master Shin's office, who greeted him with a smile and wave, telling him to hurry inside. He returned so quickly. Did the demon extermination mission go smoothly? He greeted him respectfully and said that thanks to his leadership, everything went well. The old man told him not to rush away. They would sit, drink, and play. MC sat down and said that he won the game last time. He can't admit defeat. Master Shin didn't want to admit it and therefore answered rather vaguely. After which he said, he thought long and hard and figured out his strategy, so let him make the first move. Leon smiled and suggested that he not break the rules. If he wins, he will provide him with some useful information. The old man agreed and they began the game. An hour passed. Master Shun was very puzzled, and the way he stroked his beard revealed how hard he was thinking about his next move. MC noted that the situation was not easy, and he scratched his bald head in confusion and was forced to agree with him. He looked harmless, even smiling at him. But on the board, his moves were deadly. Each move like a knife strike, decisive and merciless. He couldn't handle him. Liang answered him with a smile that he was just lucky. At some points, he almost lost. The old man laughed and asked he wanted a new mission, right? He replied that there were so many missions, hundreds, if not thousands, that he didn't know what to choose and came to him for advice. Master Shin thought for a moment and remarked that he liked demon-slaying missions, so they would start from there. He found something interesting, waved his finger, and pulled a wooden tablet from the top shelf, handing it to him. The tablet contained the location and mission itself: Shenzhou City, Master Ming's estate, Demon exorcism. In this world, there are three realms: heaven, earth, and human. In the human realm, inhabitants concentrate on cultivation, purifying the body, condensing chi, and spiritual development. In the earthly realm, all cultivation focuses on external aspects and elements. While in the heavenly realm, cultivation focuses on the Tao and its pursuit, as well as achieving a deep understanding of the cultivation of the heavenly essence. There are also three teachings: Taoism, Buddhism, and Confucianism. In addition, there are martial arts, demons, and various sects. Generally, all cultivation systems are similar. The sects of Mount Shu demand intense labor in exchange for resources. Although this seems harsh, it is necessary for the training of disciples. The sect cares for its disciples. Those who haven't reached the realm of spiritual cultivation cannot undertake quests outside the mountain. They can only perform various missions within the mountain gates, such as tending plants, assisting the master, and so on. Although spiritually advanced disciples are considered experienced in travel outside of Mount Shu, they can only exterminate demons. Those who venture outside the sect are usually given quests related to wealthy households and investigating incidents. Demons are rare in cities, but the same cannot be said for forests and wilderness areas. However, beyond demon slaying, there are opportunities to relax and explore bustling areas. Wealthy families are very generous in their support. In addition to paying the fees requested by the sect, they often offer generous rewards upon completion of the quest, which are often quite substantial. Old Man Shin helped him choose a task, and so he arrived in the city of Xingzhou at the estate of Master Ming Yanwei. There, he was graciously greeted by the master of the house and his servants, and he led the guest inside to discuss everything over a cup of tea. One of his maids brewed tea and served it, after which Yanwei said that with a young hero from the sect on Mount Shu, their house no longer had anything to fear. MC promised to help him and offered to discuss all the details of what had happened. The man lowered his tired gaze into his teacup and told him everything. For many generations, his family had been famous for their good deeds, and he doesn't even know why this is happening to them now. 3 days ago, strange, eerie cat cries were heard outside the mansion, haunting, sending shivers down his spine. 2 days ago, these cries were heard in their courtyard. Some of their servants witnessed a demonic creature with an incredible aura of bloodlust, and yesterday, cat-like cries reached them as well. He and his wife were terrified to hear it in the middle of the night. He became very agitated and told the young hero that if they didn't stop this creature soon, they would be killed. Liang asked him to calm down and promised to sort everything out. Judging by the time, Master Ming went to the suburban temple for help already on the second day. Temples and monasteries are permeated with the scent of incense and have strong ties to powerful sects without which they could not thrive. The Taoist temple outside the city is connected to the mountain sect, so the request was sent to the exchange pavilion. The creature appears only at night, moves cautiously, and does not resemble a demon, but rather some kind of spirit. If it has reached a certain level of cultivation, its intelligence is no different from that of a human, and its actions are also unpredictable. Only low-cultivated ghosts who experienced a tragic death and haven't let go of the grudge can behave strangely. Like this monster, it's quite possible that it's the spirit of a deceased cat. He asked the head of the household if anyone had killed a cat in their house in the past few days. Yanwei immediately shook his head. He and his wife love animals, always treating them kindly, caring for abandoned cats and dogs, feeding them. MC touched his chin in confusion and said that in that case, he would first sort out the situation and then perform a banishment ritual. The man thanked him for his help, and then he went to explore the mansion's surroundings, which he spent the entire afternoon doing. That same evening, he returned to the estate and met with the head of the household again. He smiled and told the young hero that he had worked hard. His wife would arrive soon. Perhaps she also had something to tell him. Suddenly, one of the maids ran into the room and apologized to the master for interrupting them, but his wife was unwell, so she could not come. The man immediately stood up and asked the young hero to wait a bit and ran off to check on his wife. Looking after him, Leon smiled and remarked that it was so sweet. Their love truly was strong. One of the maids agreed with him. Her master and his wife had been together for 10 years, and they were still madly in love. It was a pity that she had not been able to conceive in recent years. She even suggested that her husband acquire concubines to produce heirs, but he would never cheat on his wife. Both maids burst into tears and said that only such a beautiful and kind-hearted woman deserved such deep, sincere love. Sometime later, when it was already completely dark, Yanwei returned to Liang and apologized to him for standing there waiting for him for so long. He asked if his wife was feeling well, to which he replied that it was nothing serious, just something that was happening to her. They would deal with the monster and she would probably get better. MC promised him he would do everything in his power. And at that moment the doors swung open and a powerful gust of wind blew into the room, sweeping all the food off the table. The master of the estate exclaimed that the monster had returned. The frightened maids ran, and Long immediately headed for the exit towards this ominous energy and closed his eyes. He felt a strong yin energy and was only just convinced that it was a ghost, but he also sensed a strong demonic aura. He immediately turned to the master of the estate and told him to hide quickly, but he and his maids had already done so. And from another room, a man's plaintive voice was heard, asking the young hero to help them. Now everything depended on him. He noticed that they were running quite fast. They will definitely have time to escape even if the entire city is captured by monsters. He decided to get back to business, drew his sword and pointed it at the cat, and even became a little nervous. This is a vengeful spirit arising from an unforgiven grievance and the ghost of an unborn baby whose grievances are 10 times stronger, or it could be a demonic spirit. But it's also creepy. A vengeful spirit, a ghost of a baby, a demonic spirit. Each of them is unique in its own way, and the creature in front of him has all the enhancements of each of these creatures. The cat screamed heartrendingly, but then this creature saw Leon and immediately started to run. He swung, used swordsmanship and sent it flying, which scared the cat. But then it quickly managed to dodge and was about to attack the young hero. Sharp claws tore his clothes, but he was able to dodge, and then he aimed his sword at this demon. This time, the creature was unable to avoid the blow, and the sword wounded it. Now the cat was on the ground. It began to gather energy around it to heal the wound, and MC thought, this is bad. The spirit has absorbed all sorts of buffs. The damage it receives is converted into its power. The more wounds, the stronger it is. If he doesn't kill it with one blow, he will have to prepare to meet an even stronger enemy. The hallmark of this spirit is speed. The cat suddenly began to move quickly from side to side. Liang prepared himself. He carefully watched the creature's every move, and when it attacked him from behind, he took out a rope and tied the cat, which made it no longer move. He exhaled with relief. It was close. He cannot make any more mistakes. He looked at the defeated spirit with a satisfied grin and thought, what works best when dealing with fast enemies? That's right, control. Luckily, he had a rope which he recently received in the White Tower, but even this thing does not guarantee an accurate hit. To use this at close range, he took a risky step and deliberately let the spirit get close. If the speed of the rope's release slowed even slightly, the outcome of the fight would be different. He must maintain composure and keep his distance. Otherwise, the spirit would escape him. Now it was time to end this. He raised his sword and pierced the spirit's body, causing its shell to immediately dissipate, and it absorbed its soul. Compared to the spider demon, the K-Mu cat spirit was much more difficult to fight. The inhabitants of the estate witnessed his entire fight, and as soon as it was over, they joyfully ran out into the courtyard to thank him. While they praised his skills, he smiled awkwardly and wondered when they had managed to appear here. Since it was late at night, he spent the night here, and as soon as the sun rose, he got up. A maid entered his room and noted that he had risen early. The master was inviting him to a celebratory banquet. He might need some help getting dressed and grooming himself, so she came here. While brushing his teeth, he thanked her for her concern but declined as he was perfectly capable of taking care of himself. She could go and he would be back soon. The maid was a little upset that she had not had the honor of changing the young hero's clothes and left. He looked after her with a puzzled expression, and before going to the banquet, he decided to visit Madame. He approached the house, plucked up his courage, and knocked on the door. Madame Ming's muffled voice was heard, asking who had come to see her. He introduced himself to her and said that he heard she was feeling unwell, so he came to visit her. She asked, so he is the young hero of Mount Shusek. She wouldn't be able to receive him now, but she appreciated his kindness. He frowned. She didn't want to let him in. Maybe she was deliberately avoiding him. He said he'd heard from her husband that she'd been ill for a long time. What if he could help her with the sex secret techniques? He'd offer her treatment and she'd recover. He could wait for her here or come back when she was ready. Judging by her silence, she was considering his proposal, after which footsteps were heard from within the room. A minute later, Madame Ming opened the door slightly and peered out, apologizing for the long wait and inviting him inside. She lit some candles, poured him some warm water, and said she was a little surprised. She felt better after he dealt with the monster, so he shouldn't worry. He said that he actually wanted to discuss something with her regarding the cat spirit. She was slightly surprised by his question and asked what was going on, and he said he had a guess. The spirit was quite unusual. It was a combination of a vengeful demonic spirit and a baby ghost. He even became interested when he saw it. And then he thought, why did the spirit come to their house? Madame Ming became nervous and assumed that the spirit just wanted to harm them. There must be some other reasons. He told her that she was right. It was obvious. A vengeful spirit takes revenge, as the name suggests. The baby ghost is looking for its mother, but the cat spirit stayed in the residence for 3 days without harming anyone, as if it was looking for something. She was starting to get angry and asked what he thought the spirit was looking for. He told her that her husband said their family was known for being kind to animals. So was it possible that the spirit was looking for its mother? But if it was a demonic spirit, it was logical to assume that its mother was a demon. Ever since the cat spirit appeared here, someone had been hiding in the residence and hadn't shown up until now, and it was talking about her. She laughed and asked if he was hinting that she was a demon. He told her that maybe it was, maybe not. They would find out soon. She suddenly stood up abruptly, measured him with her gaze, and thought, a demon voluntarily emits demonic energy when it reveals its true form. He looked away and nervously suggested that she just sit down and talk calmly, but she continued to stare at him and think. If this youth hasn't reached a high level of cultivation or is simply hiding his abilities, it's clear he's not particularly experienced. There's a special tool for revealing demons, a mirror. This item is extremely rare, hard to find even in the palaces of the human world. But the Shu sect has one such mirror, but will they allow a junior disciple to carry it around to reveal demons? She put one hand behind her back, ready to attack it at any moment, and asked if he had a mirror that could reveal a demon's true form. He shook his head and told her with a smile that he didn't have that, but he did have something else. He, in turn, hit a gold bar behind his back. They both sized each other up, then simultaneously pointed their fingers and told each other to turn around. There's someone. The fact that they had pulled the same trick on each other made them feel awkward. It was now clear she was hiding her identity. She laughed and said that there was no point in wasting time. She had already lit a candle with a hidden illusory heart poison. If he wanted the antidote, he should leave the residence and never come back. He responded that he had also prepared before coming here. He suppressed his breathing and internal energy, so her poison and all her other tricks were useless. None of them would work on him. She became nervous. She always thought that she was very careful, but this young man outsmarted her. Where did he learn all this? There was no way out. She said excitedly that she had never harmed anyone. She just wanted to live in peace and tranquility next to her husband. He had already completed his task. Why didn't he just leave? He answered her that if he just left and forgot everything that happened here, the task would not be counted. Realizing that he wouldn't let her go so easily, she waved her hand and struck him with the whip, exclaiming, "Why is he so stubborn?" He dodged her attack, quickly drew his sword, and swung it, pulling the whip to the side and tied it around his sword. And the woman pulled it towards herself, causing the rope to tighten and the table between them to immediately break. They both held the whip tightly, then she leaned forward and mentally asked him to just leave here. Because she let go of the whip, MC almost fell, and then she rushed to attack. He prepared himself, deliberately letting her get closer to him, and dodged, and she fell. He quickly drew a rope, threw it at the demon, and she deftly dodged. But the rope moved on its own and headed straight for its target. She became very nervous and realized that something was wrong with the rope, and then this thing wrapped around her entire body, and she fell and could no longer move. Because of the way she was tied, she became very indignant and exclaimed, "What is he doing?" Liang approached her with a gloomy expression on his face. She became very scared, thought of something else, and told him to just kill her. Understanding what she was thinking, he became agitated and said that he had not had such thoughts at all. Because of this, she became even more scared and burst into tears, asking Ben if he was not going to kill her. What did he want? She did not expect this from him. Her husband came running to the noise. He ran into the room, and seeing the state of his wife and what the young hero had done to her, he was taken aback. His gaze darted from her to him, and he asked in shock, did he come at the wrong time? MC felt very awkward and said that, on the contrary, he arrived on time. The man burst into tears, but since he loved his wife very much and wanted her to be happy, he decided to let the situation go. But Leon assured him that everything was not as he thought. The man approached her and helped her up, telling the young hero that he did not understand what was happening, but that he should immediately free her. He asked him to listen to him first. Everything he was about to say was the pure truth. Now he cannot free her because she is a demon. Yanwei's hands trembled. He hugged his wife even tighter and exclaimed that this is all nonsense. It is impossible. Why did he come to such conclusions? He said that since he did not believe him, he would reveal her true form. He reached into his pants, pulled out a gold bar, and Madame Ming asked him not to. She pushed her husband away from her and said that she was simply afraid to tell him the truth. He was surprised, and then she burst into tears and showed him her true form as a cat demon, but he didn't care. He immediately hugged her and exclaimed, "How is this possible? She was so kind and had. Even if she is a demon, he doesn't care. So be it." She looked up at him and smiled slightly, asking, "Who said that all demons are evil?" She had lived in the mountains with her parents and older brother since childhood. Even as a demon, she had never harmed anyone, so she lived for 100 years until one day she met him. Most likely he doesn't remember, but 20 years ago he saved a small mountain cat. He remembered meeting a cat stuck in a trap in the forest and asked in surprise, "So it was her?" She confirmed it. At that time, she was still in the early stages of cultivation. In the mountains, she encountered a ferocious wolf. She had to fight for her life and the chances of escape were practically zero. But she managed to escape and ended up caught by a hunter. At that moment, she thought she would never see her parents and brother again, but a passing boy saved her. Yanwei joyfully exclaimed that he remembered it. He was very young then, ran away from school and went to play in the mountains and saved a cute little kitten. He wanted to take her home to nurse her back to health, but she ran away as soon as he freed her. She continued. After that, she diligently practiced her cultivation. All these 10 years, she studied the shape-shifting technique. Only then did she master the art of reincarnation as a human. She simply left the mountains, not even daring to tell her family about it, and she did not even expect that they would meet again. On that rainy evening, they bumped into each other and fell in love at first sight. He had grown so much then, but he had not changed one bit. Yanwei said with a smile that he thought it was their first meeting, but he could not imagine that he was seeing her for the second time. She said that everything that followed was like a dream. She fell in love with him, and they got married. She still can't believe it. Human life is truly filled with happiness, but one day she became pregnant. Hearing this, he was very surprised and exclaimed, "So she can give birth to a child?" She answered him that, of course she could, but she wouldn't dare. She burst into tears even more, her voice trembling, and said that she decided not to give birth to a child because she couldn't change her form completely. She carried a devil's spawn within her, and once the child was born, its true nature would be revealed. She lied, saying that she had returned to her parents, but in fact she had secretly gone to the mountains and gotten rid of the child. He didn't know what hardships she had to endure. He hugged her tightly and burst into tears, exclaiming, "So what if she was a demon?" As he said before, he didn't care. Over all these years, their love and connection had become even stronger. So how could he leave her? She said that spending 10 years of her life with him was the truest happiness, but it seemed that this was where their paths diverged. She pulled away from him and headed towards Leon, saying that their child had turned into a vengeful spirit and that was why she had been discovered. She stood in front of him and defiantly said that if he wanted to kill her or start torturing her, then he should do it right now. Her husband immediately rushed to her and yelled at her, telling her not to dare do this. She had done nothing wrong. They would handle everything together. He fell on his knees in front of Liang, shielding his wife, and declared that he was ready to give him all the wealth of his family in exchange for him sparing his and his wife's lives. MC remained silent and thought, demons inhabiting human land are already a problem. Killing them is completely legal and righteous, and their deaths are especially useful for him because he can gain a huge advantage. But sparing her and taking all of Master Mib's wealth doesn't sound so bad. Even for a wealthy man, such a decision is very difficult. In general, any decision is beneficial for him, and he made his decision, sighed heavily, and shook his head from side to side, which made Yanwei freeze in shock. And his wife smiled bitterly and thought that she was ready to exchange 10 years of her life for one. Seeing their reaction, Liang said that they had understood everything wrong. In their opinion, he looks like a man who enjoys killing others. They stared at him in bewilderment. after which he untied the woman and said that he would not use anything against her except a rope. He probably didn't have much time left. The poison might take effect soon, so let them listen to him carefully. If she really had never harmed anyone, then they should follow him to the mountain gate. He turned towards the exit and told them to follow him. He would not harm them. All this is necessary to seal Madame Ming's powers. He sighed heavily and turned to her asking if she really wanted to see her husband lose everything. If she returned to Mount Shu with him, he would ask for a title. Hearing this, she was very happy and asked if he was telling the truth. Her husband was shocked. He misunderstood everything and decided that his beloved no longer wanted to stay with him, which made her at first confused and then glared at him irritably and said, she doesn't understand what he's talking about. She's angry that he's misunderstanding everything. Asking for a title is a serious matter for beings like her. She never revealed her identity to him, so he most likely isn't particularly well versed in such matters. He was so nervous he was sweating profusely and wiped his face with a handkerchief, and she continued. A request for a title is different from what happens in the mortal world, from monsters and spirits, which requires a title from humans. Granting a title does not mean following the ancient practice of legitimizing a monster's status. A spirit or other being is officially recognized as benevolent. Demons can live freely in the human realm. This can be compared to granting citizenship. A monster without official recognition is like an illegal resident. And if cultivators find a wild monster infiltrating a human city, the sentence will be carried out on the spot. And the reason she was so afraid to approach the young hero is because her true form would be revealed. Only the human realms and the 9 heavenly sects have the power to grant titles. For monsters, the heavenly sects are considered something untouchable. They have no chance of making contact unlike the other 10 earthly sects, but they do not have the power to grant titles to demons. Obtaining a title is an incredibly difficult task. The current human dynasty is called the Yu dynasty, and the country has enjoyed peace and prosperity for over 600 years. However, any demon living in a human city can lurk, posing a hidden threat even in times of peace. It is said that those not of her kind have different hearts. Be it the imperial court or the heavenly sects, granting a title is tantamount to approval. If this creature causes chaos in the future, the one who bestowed the title bears responsibility for it. Even disciples of the 9 heavenly sects rarely bother with such troublesome matters. When encountering monsters, the easiest way is to kill them regardless of whether they are good or bad. She fell to her knees and said, but fortunately, the one who discovered her identity was a young hero, and he is willing to bestow this title on her. He is so kind to her, but she can do nothing in return. She can only express her endless gratitude. They both bowed to him, thanking him for his help, and MC waved his hand saying that they didn't have to go that far. Yanwei looked at him resolutely and said, to express their gratitude for saving both him and his wife, he was willing to give him all their family's property. Liang politely declined, saying that he had a large family that still needed to be supported, and he could give all the property to Madame Ming. She asked the young hero not to be offended, but her husband was a commoner. Worldly goods really looked unworthy in the eyes of the young hero, so she was willing to offer him their maids as payment. They both had abundant energy. They were useful for dual cultivation, and she personally trained them. MC became nervous and said that he was still very young. He didn't even understand what she was talking about. So having dealt with the Ming family's affairs, he returned to the sect with Madame Ming and her husband. The whole process of obtaining the title went quite quickly. In the Mount Shu sect, disciples like him are not allowed to request titles for monsters. Such matters are handled by respected masters. His teacher is a righteous and noble man. Praising him for his handling of the incident at the estate, she promised to look into the matter. As for what happens next, the Heavenly Peak side dares not be careless under her supervision, so they took a responsible approach to sealing Madame Ming's powers. After undergoing all the necessary processes, Madame Ming confirmed that she is a benevolent monster who has never harmed anyone or taken human life. Upon completion of the process, she received an official title from Mount Shu and happily returned home with her husband. Since her powers were sealed, she was given an artifact to maintain her human form. From now on, she will be a frequent visitor to Mount Shu to pay her respects and receive the sect's guidance on various matters. As for Liang, he locked himself in a small room, immersed in his own world. Returning to the White Tower, he approached the cage housing the cat's soul and said with a smile, after each new mission, he becomes stronger. He doesn't know what will happen now after the upgrade. Maybe he'll get some good items. He pressed the button, and the cat's soul turned into a treasure, a cat spirit talisman. This allows you to possess a cat spirit, significantly increasing your agility, and the effect lasts about an hour. One of the side effects is the unconscious licking of your palm, but you can quickly get used to it. MC wasn't very happy with this acquisition. Even killing a small spider brought him treasure, and this was just a one-time talisman. But he wasn't upset. This one must have high power. He uses it at the most critical moment. Hearing the noise, he quickly returned to reality. And when he turned around, he saw a crane peering into his window, a messenger from the immortal sect. Seeing the bird, Liang immediately realized that a new issue of the newspaper had come out. Within the 9 heavenly sects, there's a clan called the Heavenly Turning Pavilion. This clan specializes in divination and fortune-telling, considered the closest to the celestial mysteries of all the schools. Although they aren't strong in combat, they are respected by all the great sects. And the fact that the pavilion is part of the 9 sects is proof of this. Their sideline is collecting rumors and strange stories from the world, publishing a monthly newspaper called the 7-Star Herald. Over hundreds of years, this newspaper has become popular across the globe, from the heavenly sects to street children. Everyone reads it with fascination, and Liang is no exception. He received the new issue of the newspaper and immediately began reading it, eager to find out what great events had happened in the cultivator world this month. After all, he was preparing to descend from the mountain and needed to keep an eye on the outside world. First, he checked the rankings. This list records all known magical artifacts and ranks them. There are few changes each month, and for convenience, a separate article is published detailing the rankings movements. The positions mostly shift at the bottom of the list, while the greatest artifacts of the Celestial Empire have remained virtually unchanged for hundreds of years. For example, the human world artifact, the Demon Subjugation Tower, always ranks first. He sighed heavily because in previous years, it was thanks to this tower that Shushan had joined the 9 sects and at times even held first place among them, leading the entire righteous path. But 500 years ago, a great disaster occurred, and Shushan lost this sacred relic. Since then, the sect has steadily weakened, and now its strength surpasses many of the 10 earthly sects. Voices that Shushan is unworthy of being in the 9 heavenly sects are growing louder. He decided to ignore it so as not to get upset and flip to the second item on the list, the 7-Star Sword. He grimaced, thinking that the first sacred relic only had a name, while the treasure of the heavenly pavilion itself already had vivid descriptions and special effects. Although the pavilion doesn't interfere in feuds, they devote themselves entirely to cultivating divine beasts, digging up rumors, and playing cards. The 7-Star Sword hasn't been unsheathed for many years. The last time it was unsheathed was 100 years ago, when the demonic sect awakened the Changshi monster trying to attack the pavilion. Then the current pavilion leader fought all the 7-Star Swords single-handedly. With one strike, she suppressed Changshi. With the next, she swept away 300 demonic cultivators. And with the third, she smashed another 300 monsters. In the end, she wiped out the entire demon sect with this sword. So the power of such a weapon is truly terrifyingly great. But rumor has it that each use of the sword costs the pavilion dearly. However, they won't tell such secrets to outsiders. He scrolled down to the 3rd place on the rankings, the Mirror 8 trigrams fallen from the heavens. This artifact belongs to the Misty Mountains, also from the 9 heavenly sects. They say the reason they rank below the 7-Star Sword is simply because the pavilion itself is compiling the list. He scrolled down several times and thought that such relics were too far removed from reality. Looking at their shadows is of little use. And suddenly he stopped noticing something familiar. His master's pendant, a phoenix spirit blood jade, but it looked strange. For some reason, it was shaped differently. He tried twisting it around, and finally it looked exactly like his master's pendant. It was no wonder it seemed familiar. He just never seen a phoenix spirit in its entirety. He remembered the pendant lying on his master's chest and wondered if that image was its true form. It seemed the greatest artifacts weren't so far removed from reality after all. The treasure list wouldn't help him much right now, so he decided to look at the Winds of the 9 Provinces section. It seemed there had been quite a few high-profile events in the past month. The head of the Misty Mountains, the immortal Zhu Yi, emerged from seclusion and engaged 2 guardians of the Dark Sect. He killed the Silver King, and the Golden Marquise fled wounded. The dark sect, one of the pillars of the demonic path, had been rapidly gaining strength in recent years and was preparing to take the stage, but the performance of the immortal Jew was a serious blow. Now he wonders how the mysterious sect leader will react. Next comes the news. A disciple named Luo Yao has appeared in the Valley of Three Poisons, one of the 10 earthly sects. In the southern lands, she exterminated 3 sorcerer sects in a month, and the valley itself rests on 3 pillars: poison, curse, and witchcraft. With such hatred for witchcraft, her sect comrades can only tremble. And more news from Shushan. The head of Jade Sword Peak, Wang Xianling, recently killed a dragon on the East Sea that was destroying fishing boats. Seeing a whole article about him, MC became excited and remembered his master. She has always disliked the head of Jade Peak, so he has a bad feeling about this. Suddenly, a roar was heard outside. Nufeng flew out of the sect at high speed and told her disciples she would be leaving for a few days. He looked after her, dumbfounded. Knowing her temperament, she definitely wouldn't tolerate Wang Xianling becoming famous. The surprising she held back. He's not worried about her life, but he is very worried about the ecosystem of the Eastern Sea. His teacher always strives to be first. After finishing reading, he stretched and thought that a lot of time had passed. It was time for him to go to the exchange pavilion and hand in the last order for the demon exorcism. While he was flying there, he decided to finish reading the 7-Star Herald. He finally reached the popular section, Rumors and Tales of the Celestial Empire. Compared to the serious winds of the 9 provinces, such a lighter section was much more interesting. The Emperor of the Yu dynasty inspected the Ascended Dragon Academy and wanted to betroth his youngest daughter, Princess Jingyang, to the Academy's #1 student, Zhang Cheng. He refused, citing romance as a hindrance to his studies. Liang chuckled softly after reading this. The Ascended Dragon Academy is the premier Confucian school, backed by the imperial court and ranked among the most powerful sects. As the #1 student, Zhang Cheng had a bright future, either on the path of cultivation or as an official. But after such a refusal, his future became uncertain. The emperor isn't the only one puzzled over his daughter's marriage. The leader of the Thunder Fortress sect also announced he would give his daughter, Huang Lina, and the 10 treasures of the loyal to whoever becomes his son-in-law. But no one responded because Lina herself said that only someone stronger than her could become her husband. Otherwise, he would become fodder for her mammoth on the very first day. This girl has a rather complex personality. By this time, he had already arrived at the pavilion and noticed that there was news from Shushan in the rumor section. This month, Fairy Zhang Yubai was spotted with Feng Chaoyang from the Heavenly King sect. They dined together at the Drunken Moon restaurant in Zhongnan. Rumors of a romantic relationship were circulating. The MC was even surprised. Although the pavilion never makes things up, they write rumors out of caution if the relationship is unconfirmed. Suddenly, a guy's voice came from the side who had just read the article and exclaimed that it was absolutely impossible. Their Fairy Zhang would never let that scoundrel from the Heavenly King sect take him away. He begs her to leave her love behind in Shushan. A girl nearby asked irritably, even if they like Fairy Zhang, why insult Feng Chaoyang? He's a hard-working and kind-hearted ideal. Her friend agreed with her, and at 19 he was already almost the top disciple of his sect. They were jealous of him. They exclaimed that second-rate idols were striving for the stars, and she asked in response, are they any better with their lemon-colored faces? Liang walked past them and thought, so there you have it. Different people, different feelings. They seemed too noisy to him. He decided to go buy the necessary supplies and set off on a new quest. He reached the main square with only 20-odd coins in his wallet. The technique books in the defense hall were beyond his means, and the flying swords from the transmission hall were even more so. So the only option left was the alchemy hall. He simply had no choice. There, he spent all 20-odd coins and bought 4 spiritual focusing pills for the spiritual intent rank. His cough might have cleared, but at least he had invested in the most essential items. With their help, he would soon be able to break through to the mid-stage. Unlike others, he can spend everything on pills, and the benefits are enormous. The work of exorcising demons must continue. And while he has the White Tower, he must make the most of it. Leaving the alchemy hall, he headed to the main hall. This time, he decided not to disturb Master Shin and choose a quest himself, but he ran into a problem. There were too many quests for the spiritual intent rank. A nearby cultivator shouted, collecting the human-faced jade soul flower. The reward is generous. They are 1 person short, and they set out immediately. They are led by a senior at the Golden Core stage, so they guarantee absolute safety. MC turned at the sound of his voice. This guy kept recruiting people to join the team, and he wondered if he was talking about the Jade Soul Flower. The guy also mentioned an amazing 3-day excursion to the southern region's Pacification Mountains, and Liang was very interested. Lots of people fighting in an open field and a bunch of demonic beasts binding shackles, exterminating demons. He loved it all. The more people who complete a quest, the higher its difficulty. And the higher the difficulty, the more demons there are. The more demons, the more souls there are to refine into treasure. If a quest is teeming with demons, it must be good. He really enjoyed it all and approached those cultivators saying he wanted to join the team quest. They were overjoyed that the team had formed so quickly. After which, the guy who was calling everyone over happily shook his hand and said, "Welcome." It was obvious at first glance that he was an experienced fighter. They were very lucky to have him join them. MC immediately noticed that even though he didn't know them, they were all very welcoming. It seemed the disciples of Mount Shu truly were like a single family, and there were no barriers between them. After that, they quickly completed the quest, and the guy threw his arm over Leon's shoulder and said that they would discuss the details along the way. "His name is Lin Bei." "What's his name?" MC introduced himself to him and then greeted all the other team members and learned their names. The eldest of them said his name was Fan Ting. If he didn't mind, he could just call him Big Brother Fan. Next to him was Su Jiqing, the treasurer of their peak, and Lu Ren. Although they were from different peaks, they were all disciples of the Mount Shu school, so he should feel free and at ease with them. Lin Bei happily said that since everyone had exchanged greetings, they would set out right away. By the way, they were from Jade Sword Peak. And where was he from? Hearing this, MC flinched. And when he said he was from Silver Sword Peak, they flinched too. Everyone froze in shock. Their faces darkened, and they immediately began to keep their distance from them. The disciples of Mount Shu are united like family, but Silver and Jade Sword Peak are exceptions. The 5 sword peaks of Mount Shu School have been united in spirit for centuries. But in this generation, 2 heads of different peaks have become irreconcilable opponents. Jade Sword Peak's headmaster, Wang Xianling, as the oldest, possesses overwhelming authority and an unyieldingly tough character. Meanwhile, Silver Sword Peak's headmaster, Di Nufeng, is young and fiery and has always disliked anyone who disdains her. So arguments inevitably arise between them whenever they meet. When mentors openly display opposition, their disciples naturally follow suit. In particular, the recent rumor of a bet between Wang Xianling and Di Nufeng has spread throughout the mountain, and Silver Sword Peak is now viewed as an enemy by the disciples of Jade Sword Peak. Because of all this, they were extremely uneasy. Lin Bei thought that withdrawing his hand now would definitely be inappropriate. Fan Ting also felt uneasy. They had previously greeted the sole representative Silver Sword Peak so warmly, but now they couldn't change their attitudes so abruptly. Ziking was also uneasy. Why? Out of the hundreds of disciples of Mount Shu, did they have to run into someone from Silver Sword Peak now? But Lin Bei quickly dispelled the awkwardness, hugging Liang and saying that they heard there was only one disciple at Silver Sword Peak and that they'd met him today. It was quite a coincidence. MC agreed, and Lin Bei, turning to his friends, said that since they'd already received the quest, they should set off quickly. They agreed since it was too late to refuse, and Zicheng exasperatedly said, "Silver Sword Peak is so hostile to them. It looks like this guy isn't a good person either." Fanting said that she'd have to be patient this time, after which the 3 of them abruptly walked around them and walked in front. This made Lin Bei feel awkward in front of Liang, who said that he knew about the relationship between their sex and should have understood his reaction. He replied that everything was fine. The main thing was to kill more demons. Lin Bei agreed with him. They were all disciples of Mount Shu, and their main goal was to work together to exterminate demons and defend righteousness. Then he would tell him more about their mission. First, their leader, elder brother, and mentor was Fan Ting. He was currently at the initial stage of the Golden Core level, and with him, safety on missions was guaranteed. MC was puzzled by the fact that his sword didn't look like their standard flying swords. It looked very powerful. Lin Bei said that Fanting was certainly strong. At first glance, he was only 1 level higher than their spiritual intent, but this was already a barrier between human and earthly limits, the very obstacle that most cultivators couldn't overcome in their entire lives. They were still far from the Golden Core level. As for the youngest, Zicheng, they're mostly accompanying her because this is her first mission outside the mountain. She's the biological younger sister of their Jade Sword Peak's top disciple, Shuxiang, but since he recently went into seclusion, they've brought her along. Liang was surprised to find that he knew the name. In recent years, the Mount Shu school has weakened, and in terms of the number of strong disciples, they're inferior to the other 9 heavenly gates of immortals. As for the most famous names in generations, those are Zhang Yubai and Shijiang. Lin Bei laughed and remarked, being in the same league as the famous Zhang still speaks volumes about the status of their Jade Sword Peak. But generally speaking, all disciples of their school at the initial stage of the spiritual intent level, like Ziqin, go on their first mission in a group with experienced older brothers or sisters. And he, as the only disciple of Silver Sword Peak, with whom did he go on his first mission? MC replied that he'd always done demon-slaying quests alone, which shocked Lin Bei. He sincerely admired him and said it was so cool. He'd been doing everything alone from the start. He was just crazy. Liang asked what was normal then, and he explained. First, you do group quests until you reach the middle or end of your spiritual intent level, and only then start going out on solo demon-slaying quests. MC mentally noted, it sounds reasonable. Going solo kills slower and less. To kill many demons in one outing, it's better to go on long raids in a group. So in the future, he should take on more group demon-slaying quests. Noticing his thoughtful expression, Lin Bei remarked that he was very interested in group quests. Then next time, they could get together again if possible. Liang smirked and replied that this time it could be considered a coincidence. But if he called him next time, his school brothers would kill him on the spot. He became indignant and said that it was all nonsense. He was always happy to make new friends. He almost forgot to mention the last member of the team. Lu Ren, like them, was at the initial stage of the spiritual intent level. Now that he was familiar with them all, he would tell him about the mission. The location was the outskirts of the southern region's pacification mountains. Although demons dwelled there with Fonting, the process shouldn't be that difficult as long as he led them. Their specific goal was to penetrate deep into the outskirts of the mountains, wait for the right moment, and pick a jade flower with a human face. But this was only the general outline of their mission. They would discuss and approve the specific plan of action along the way with the others. MC thanked him with a smile. Now he understood the whole point. The wild jungle teeming with demonic beasts was simply a beautiful place for Liang. A day passed and they reached the outskirts of the Heavenly Realm's peak. But since there was no further path, only clouds, Ziqing used her energy to summon a beast. Soon, a huge white bird appeared in the sky. It landed next to them, and Ziqing embraced it, welcoming it. MC was surprised. He was also at the initial stage of spiritual intent. He didn't even have 20 coins, but this girl could afford such a luxurious, enormous spirit pet. He envied her. She climbed onto the bird and told her friends to hop on, but she didn't want to call Liang out of hostility. As he approached the bird, she gave him a displeased look, causing him to become despondent and mentally tell her. No matter how she glared at him, he would still have to fly on this bird. Lin Bei encouraged him, telling him to climb up. And as soon as they sat down, he thought with anticipation, is the next goal the southern region's taming mountains? Finally, they were descending from the mountains to slay demons. When the mood is right, flying on a sword among the mountains is both agile and enjoyable. Sword flying is fast, and for mere mortals it looks very cool. But during long flights, the flyer himself can be both exhausting and cold, a rather pitiful sight. But flying the distance on a mount, that's truly cool. While he was enjoying the ride, Lin Bei called out to him and said that they were already approaching the edge of the taming mountains. These mountains lie at the junction of the southern region and the central lands. They stretch for 800 li like a high wall separating these two territories. The city there is tall. The valleys are deep. The forests are vast and dense, and there are rumors of demons and monsters appearing there. So even great masters don't dare venture deeper. But he shouldn't worry. The place they're heading to is just the outskirts, a small border forest, so it's not that dangerous. They say this flower is also paired, that is 2 heads on a single stem. Earlier, one of the seniors from their school accidentally found it, but then it was not ripe and could not be picked. So the task was passed on to the sword exchange pavilion. According to the timing, the flowering should be right around now, so they set off to complete the task. MC thought that the man in front of him was somehow too talkative. It seemed that since he met him, he had not been silent for a second, as if he could not bear to keep his mouth shut. And then an idea occurred to him. Maybe he was not a sympathetic person at all, but simply an incorrigible chatterbox. He decided not to dwell on it and, not listening to what he was saying, glanced at the three of them and noticed how far away they were sitting. Perhaps they weren't ignoring him at all, but simply avoiding Lin Bei. Half an hour passed, and they finally landed at the entrance to the forest, and the bird flew away. Before going any further, Fan Ting told him to listen carefully. There were many demons and mature beasts in the mountains of humility, and flying through the air was strictly prohibited, so they would go on foot. This forest is full of grass and tree spirits, and even during the day, toxic fumes linger, so they'll have to walk, holding their breath and retaining their chi. They won't be able to restore their true chi, so they'll have to be extremely careful when expending their strength. He needs to maintain his cultivation, so he'll delegate the task of clearing the way to them. He told the boys they'll be taking turns. Do they have any objections? Lin Bei touched his chin in confusion and thought, although the forest contains toxic fumes, for those still at the stage of spiritual intent, all meridians are already unified, and holding their breath for a long time is entirely possible. But if one can't breathe, then one can't fulfill one's true purpose, meaning everyone's reserves are limited and very precious. But even if they encounter grass and tree spirits along the way, blocking the way, someone will still have to expend strength to break through. Fan Ting, as the strongest, must conserve his energy for emergencies, and can't waste it on trivial matters like clearing the way. Jiqing, meanwhile, is the weakest, and this is her first time descending the mountain. She naturally needs to be protected in the center of the group. The three of them will take turns clearing the way. Fan Ting had thought everything through quite fairly and sensibly. Suddenly, Liang raised his hand and said he had a suggestion for the path-clearing plan. Fan Ting's expression immediately darkened, and the others thought he was up to no good. But he merely said that he could handle the task of clearing the road and exterminating demons alone. No need to switch. They were very surprised to hear this. In such a demon-infested forest where Chu Chi cannot be replenished, you never know what danger might lurk. Lin Bei was confused and surprised. According to common sense, if an unexpected danger were to occur, the more true energy you had left, the higher your chance of survival. To avoid being caught in a hopeless situation, no one would want to waste chi clearing the way. So Fan Ting proposed a fair plan. The three of them would swap. But when Liang said he had a proposal, he thought he would try to shirk this responsibility or drag Fan Ting and Jiqing into it. He never expected that this smiling guy would volunteer to bear the entire burden of clearing the way alone. After all, he was just like him, only at the initial stage of spiritual intent. He felt ashamed for thinking so badly of his own school brother. He called out to him excitedly and said that this was no joke. And besides, the journey could take an hour or even more. If he expended all his true chi, it would also harm the subsequent flower harvesting operation, so it would be better for them to swap in turns. MC told him it was fine. He could handle it. If he felt his chi running low, he would retreat and switch with someone. He covered his fist with his palm in a respectful gesture and told his siblings that his cultivation was low and he could only help them a little, so they should at least let him put in more effort here. All three of them stared at him in surprise. It seemed they had changed their minds about him. Fan Ting turned to the forest and said that if he insisted, they would start with him. The sun was already setting, so they needed to enter the forest quickly. But before entering, he turned to him and said worriedly if he expended more than half his energy, then he should switch immediately. If he waited until he expended all his energy, it would be too late. Leon smiled and told him not to worry. He understood everything. Zicheng felt uneasy, lowering her gaze in shame and thinking that she had previously been prejudiced against this guy from Silver Sword Peak because her mentor had always cared so much for her. When she broke through to the spiritual intent level, he even gave her a bird as a gift. Her mentor is a very important family member. She had heard that Di Nufeng, the master of Silver Sword Peak, didn't acknowledge her mentor. So after learning that Liang was her only disciple, she began to slowly dislike him. When he sat on the back of her pet, she even felt offended, and she deliberately sat in front to ignore him. But this guy volunteered to help the team, clearly to improve relations with everyone. She ignored him. How unkind of her. In fact, MC didn't care how they treated him. He only thought about the fact that all the demons in his path were now his, and here was his chance to cultivate alone, and then a thought flashed through Jiqing's mind. She suddenly noticed that when he was quietly silent, he was also handsome, and his smile had been beautiful just now. It was immediately obvious he was a good person, so she should also contribute for him. She ran up to him and, with a smile, handed him 3 chi-gathering pills and asked him to take them, which greatly surprised him. These pills quickly replenish true chi. So in this situation they would be very useful. But their main purpose is to accelerate cultivation after taking them. And here, where there is no opportunity to continue training, simply spending them on replenishing chi is wasteful. He shook his head and was about to refuse, but seeing her upset face, he hesitated. She looked at him with such a look, begging for forgiveness. She treated him so unfairly earlier. What should she do if he doesn't accept the gift? He took the pills with an awkward smile and thanked her, which immediately made her very happy, and said it was all nonsense. She still had plenty of such pills. After that, Liang drew his sword and walked ahead, thinking that all of this was very strange. Why had their attitude towards him suddenly changed so much? But he decided not to think about it for now. The main thing was that all the loot belonged to the one walking ahead. It was not for nothing that he volunteered to lead the way and fight the demons. Very soon, they advanced deep into the mountains, and it was already so dark that they had to light a lantern. MC walked ahead and carefully looked around, focusing on his sensations. He felt demonic energy approaching from the side, and then a carnivorous plant swooped down on them from above and opened its bud, revealing sharp teeth. Leon immediately warned everyone of the danger, pulled out his sword, and pierced the monster, but its juice fell on Zicheng. That wasn't all. MC dealt with a few more demons, and they were finally relatively safe. Liang thought only half an hour had passed, and already a dozen of these demonic flowers had been destroyed. It really was dangerous here. If he hadn't broken through to the level of spiritual intent, these flowers would have definitely killed him. Fonting placed the lantern on the nearby rocks and suggested they take a rest right there, and MC asked Zicheng if he had soiled her too much. She smiled and told him that everything was fine, and Fanting said, although Leon alone had been clearing the entire path, everyone else had also constantly kept their spiritual perception at the ready. Even if the others had conserved their chi, the constant exertion of the spirit was still very tiring. For a cultivator, spirit, chi, and consciousness are the three foundations, and none of them should be neglected. Let them turn off their spiritual perception for now and regulate their breathing. He would take over guard duty during this time. MC sat down to rest, and Lin Bei immediately ran up to him and asked with a smile, "Is he okay?" He replied that thanks to the pills Zicheng had given him, he felt quite well. Realizing he was about to start chatting with him, he immediately shut his mouth and told him to concentrate and regulate his breathing. He closed his eyes and thought about how he would kill all the monsters here, go to the White Tower, get the treasures, and so on. Since Zicheng didn't mind giving him these pills, then using them would be a pleasure for him too. He could still get them all back by simply visiting the demon lanterns again. He moved to the White Tower, split the soul of the demon flower, and obtained 100 flower powder. This is an antidote prepared with the essence of 100 flowers. Half should be taken internally, half applied externally. This thing helps fight any kind of poison. After using the powder, a floral scent lingers on the body. Jasmine at the beginning, rose in the middle, and chestnut blossom at the end. The scent is rich and lingers for a very long time. Meanwhile, Zicheng, descending on her first mission, seemed to have encountered a serious difficulty. A girl as meticulous as she was didn't want to sit on the dirty ground to regulate her breathing. And with her weak strength, she must conserve it until the very end. She hadn't shown any signs of strength along the way, and now only through pebbles and frustration. Since she no longer needed to regulate her breathing, she began to look around and suddenly heard a rustling sound coming from the bushes. She became nervous. The sound grew louder, and she tensed, already preparing to attack. And suddenly, a toad jumped out of the bushes at her, and she jumped back in fear and barely twisted to avoid accidentally touching this abomination. She was so scared that tears welled up in her eyes, and she thought, since it wasn't a demon, she didn't sense it with her spiritual perception. Her legs buckled from such surprise. Suddenly, Fonting noticed something and called out to her excitedly, warning her of danger. Neither of them noticed the demonic flower that had been nearby all this time. While they were resting, the creature took advantage of the moment and attacked Zicheng. Fanting immediately ran to her aid. He waved his hand, throwing a sword towards her, and pierced the demonic flower completely, causing a loud crash. And Liang was immediately brought back to reality, frightened. Everyone ran to Zicheng to check her for injuries, and MC stared in shock at the deep crack left by the blow, wondering what had happened. Had she really been attacked and Fanting had interfered? So this is what it means. The intervention of a gold core level master? This truly looks terrifying. Ziqing used her healing arts to heal the wounds on her leg, but since they were saturated with poison, she was unable to do so and sat down from a sudden loss of strength. Realizing she had been poisoned, she burst into tears, and the boys were horrified at the sight of the wound on her leg. Fan Ting said, "The ordinary demonic flowers in this forest aren't poisonous, but the one just now seems to be a mutated purple vine flower." Lin Bei frantically rummaged through his pockets, looking for something to help her with, and said, "This is bad. The only antidotes they've prepared are pills to neutralize the forest's toxic fumes. This purple vine flower is extremely rare, and they don't have a specific antidote for it, so there's only one way left." Fan Ting asked, "So he has a solution?" He told the girl to first cut off her own flow of qi and blood to slow the spread of the poison, and he would use a technique to suck out the poison blood. The girl shuddered, and Fan Ting immediately blocked his path, saying that his cultivation was only slightly higher than hers. If he sucked out the poisoned blood, what would happen to him? He would also be poisoned. He prepared himself and declared that his cultivation was higher, so he would be the one sucking out the blood. Ziqing was very nervous. She was uneasy about all this, and then Lu Rin intervened, telling Fan Ting that he already had a great responsibility. He shouldn't take such risks, and Lin Bei's cultivation was low. He couldn't take rash steps, so he would be the one sucking the blood. The three of them pounced on her. She burst into tears, and then Leon raised his hand and called out to them. And they turned to him with gloomy faces asking, "Does he also want to suck on her leg?" He smiled nervously and told them that they had misunderstood. He wanted to say that he had medicine that could neutralize the poison, and perhaps it would help Ziqing. Hearing this, the girl was very happy, and the guys were upset. He unwrapped the package with the 100 flowers powder and said that although this medicine was not specifically intended for the poison of demon flowers, he thought it could have some effect. Lin Bei held out his hand and told him to wait. It wasn't a special antidote, and taking it was still risky. He returned to Zeking and asked her if she would choose to take the medicine or let him suck out the poison. She immediately ran away from him, choosing the medicine, and happily asked Leon how to use it. He told her to take half internally and half externally. And she, with delight in her eyes, thanked him for helping her save her from those idiots. He sheepishly looked away, saying that she shouldn't thank him, and Lin Bei said that he couldn't help her and that his conscience was bothering him. Since he couldn't suck out the poisoned blood, maybe he could help her apply the medicine. She irritably waved him off, then took half the medicine internally, applied the other half to her leg, and then used a healing art, and finally, all the wounds disappeared. After that, she smelled the scent of flowers, and it was so fresh that her body seemed to float. Then the aroma became more intense. She felt as if she was being enveloped in flowers. The aroma grew stronger and stronger with every second. The smell too, like a wave. And suddenly, she felt some strange smell, something strong and somehow tart. She began to fall into the smell, because of which she could no longer breathe, and woke up from the obsession and wondered with surprise what just happened. She almost got stuck in this bizarre aroma. MC came up to her with a smile and noticed that she woke up. It seems that his medicine worked as it should. She looked at him in surprise and realized that this smell was coming from him too. Now she saw him as a handsome man among beautiful flowers. He sat down and extended his hand to her, asking how she feels, and so she fell in love. She was already starting to think that she smelled like this guy, and she felt really awkward, wondered what she was even thinking about. Her heart was pounding so wildly. She must have been mistaken. The smell from Liang and from her. It must be the scent of some flowers. Since she didn't answer him and her face was red, MC was already starting to worry, and wondered if this was a side effect of his 100 flowers powder. If so, then everything was bad. He immediately grabbed her by the shoulders and started shaking her, worriedly asking if she was okay. Was she feeling okay? She slapped him in the face out of embarrassment and exclaimed that she was fine. After which, she bashfully covered her face with her hands and told herself to stop thinking about all this nonsense. She needed to calm down. Pulling herself together, she awkwardly thanked Leon for the antidote. How could she thank him? He told her that everything was fine. She gave him chi-gathering pills, and he gave her 100 flower powder, so it was a favor for a favor. But she wasn't going to back down and asked if pills and 100 flower powder were comparable. He told her that they were from the same school, and besides, they were friends. Why such an exact count? The fact that he called her his friend made her very happy and said, "It's a deal. They will be good friends from now on." Lin Bei ran up to him and pointed out that they had brought him on a mission straight from the exchange pavilion. Does he always carry an antidote with him? He smiled and told him that he really did carry it just in case. Fan Ting gathered them all and said that since Jiqing was now okay, they should continue on their way, and MC ran ahead in anticipation, telling them to rely on him. He would take on the demons. Lin Bei thought this guy was a pleasure to deal with. He could fight monsters, carried excellent medicine, and was a reliable companion. Half an hour later, they had already left the path and were heading toward a crevice through the forest. Fan Ting told everyone to be on guard. They were almost there and time was running out. They needed to quicken their pace. Soon, they were at the crevice from which ominous demonic energy emanated. Lin Bei thought that in such a deep place, the echo should be strong and decided to test it. His voice echoed throughout the area, and he immediately shut his mouth, realizing he hadn't considered the possibility of attracting the attention of the nearby monsters. His comrades glanced at him, but no one reproached him. Lin Bei said, according to the instructions, the jade flower is right ahead in the gorge. There are no more flower demons here, but it will be much more dangerous. So everyone needs to be extremely careful. They descended into the valley and entered a gorge. Liang immediately noticed how quiet it was here. In the midst of these lands teeming with demons, such a peaceful spot suddenly appeared. Most likely, this was the territory of some monster lord. Up ahead, they saw the glowing silhouette of a flower, and the closer they got, the larger it became. This flower was actually a huge tree with buds at the very top. Fan Ting seriously said that they had found their target and that they should prepare to begin harvesting. They all answered him that they understood everything, and the most dangerous stage began. The flower turned its buds towards them, which made Lin Bei very nervous, and Fan Ting told them not to panic. This creature is different from the flower demons outside. This one's habits are closer to ordinary herbaceous plants. It's just quite sensitive to the vibrations around it. Now, judging by the time, evening should have fallen outside. When night falls and the rays of moonlight fall on this flower, the moment of its blooming will arrive. Until then, they are absolutely not allowed to touch it or disturb it in any way. MC felt uneasy. As for this jade flower with a human face, he had already roughly studied it on the way here. This thing is quite mysterious. If it is picked at any other time, it will lose all its spiritual power. It must be picked at the very moment when it is ripe enough to bloom in the moonlight. This is the only way to preserve its spiritual power. Although he doesn't know exactly what it looks like when it blooms, according to the information he knows, at the moment of blooming, it will do everything in its power to protect itself, and everyone who looks at it will be enchanted. Therefore, it is best to work in a team to collect this flower. At the very moment the jade flower with a human face blooms, it is necessary to place a bronze mirror in front of it, and then the illusion magic of the jade flower will turn against itself and put it to sleep. Meanwhile, another person should pick the bud. While the two are busy collecting the flower, the rest should form a three-sword formation to be ready for the appearance of monsters, protecting the treasure whose locations are unknown to them. Fan Ting said that the time has almost come. They will begin to act according to the plan they discussed. Everyone immediately rushed to their positions. Lu Ren is in charge of the mirror. Lin Bei is in charge of collecting the flower. Ziqing will stand guard, and Lian will stand opposite her to keep an eye on her and simultaneously be responsible for defense on the other side. Fan Ting took the position between them, keeping an eye on all three directions and being able to come to their aid at any moment. Now let them gather their courage, be extremely attentive, and be prepared for any surprises. They just need to wait for the right moment. Soon, moonlight filtered through the crevice. The flower began to slowly absorb it, and Fan Ting ordered everyone to concentrate. They must be ready to meet the monsters guarding the treasure at any moment. They all became wary, and MC sensed movement and realized that the first wave of attack was about to begin. Ziqing sensed it too, and at that very moment, a winged tiger leaped out of the bushes and charged at her. She was initially frightened, but then she pulled herself together and held her sword in front of her. Fan Ting volunteered to help. He threw his sword at the tiger and pierced it, after which everything became quiet. Liang felt uneasy. Every time he saw a gold core cultivator fight, he still couldn't help but curse. What a waste. If he'd just been allowed to finish off that tiger, it would have been so much better. Fan Ting noticed him sighing heavily in frustration and told him not to be so upset. He just needed to cultivate diligently. And with time, he too would be able to reach his level of mastery. MC smiled awkwardly and wondered if he thought he was upset because he saw his cultivation and felt inferior. He decided to play along and said he was absolutely right, after which Lin Bei heard some sounds and alerted the others. All sorts of monsters immediately rushed to them from all directions: snakes, birds, and huge cats. 3 monsters rushed towards MC at once, causing his eyes to light up with delight as his experience packs had finally arrived. He drew his sword and was about to attack, but Fanting, who conscientiously fulfilled his duties as the eldest in the team, decided to help him and threw a sword in his direction. At that very moment, Liang attacked in anticipation, but his sword hit Fanting's blade, which bounced off, and his weapon pierced 3 monsters at once. This was his special move, the blade of thunder and wind, swiftness. Chunks of meat flew in all directions. Several of them fell on Liang, and he stared at the eldest in shock, wondering if he had been beaten to the attack. He smiled nervously, feeling as if a loving couple having joined their destinies at the altar had almost crossed the threshold of the bridal chamber, but suddenly the bride was kidnapped. It hurt so much. The monster still did not end. Fanting deftly wielded his blade and killed absolutely all of them, desperately protecting his juniors, not even giving them a chance to counterattack. When he finished with everyone once again, he stood proudly and fixed his hair, thinking that in their eyes, he must be a cool older brother mentor. He began to expect praise from them, and MC was simply shocked. He wouldn't have said a word if he had simply helped Ziqing finish off the monster. But why was he taking its prey? Meanwhile, she was extremely nervous as this was her first time in such a situation, and her whole body was shaking from it. Fanting cleared his throat, still expecting praise. Liang dejectedly lowered his gaze. He had thought that this time he would kill a bunch of monsters, but it seemed that was not meant to be. Fanting began coughing even louder, expecting praise from Ziqing. But right now, she was replaying the recent fight in her head. Fanting was very upset, because everything didn't go as he planned. He nervously cleared his throat and told the 2 of them that if they trained hard, they would be able to perform such a move one day, but the 2 of them didn't care. Lin Bei felt uneasy and wondered if he should give the younger disciples a chance to prove themselves, but it was too late. Lin Bei warned everyone that the jade flower was about to bloom, and Lu Run immediately prepared a mirror. The buds slowly opened, faces appeared in the center of them. And when the flowers opened their eyes, they saw their reflection in the mirror and were simply delighted at how manly, strong, and beautiful they looked. While they were admiring their reflection, Lu Run tried not to look at them. Meanwhile, Lin Bei jumped up and was about to cut the stem, but suddenly someone pounced on him and stretched out their paws towards him, which frightened him and immediately blocked the blow, which forced him to retreat. He was attacked by a monkey, which was right now sitting on the stem and smiling maliciously. Fanting became furious at the sight of this monster and immediately threw his sword at it. He cursed and thought, how did they even manage to run into a human-faced ape? They needed to get rid of it as soon as possible. The ape deftly dodged his sword and laughed, then broke the stem and began to flee. Fanting, furious, ordered it to stop, used the Thunder Prison sword array, and aimed his blade ahead of it. The sword pierced directly in front of the ape, then from both sides behind, blocking its path. Fanting told his comrades that his swords had temporarily locked it in place, letting them attack right away. They simultaneously threw a sword at the ape, but it only grinned again and then transformed its body into a ghost, something they clearly didn't expect. Thanks to this ability, the ape deftly overcame the sword prison and ran on. They rushed in pursuit. Lin Bei was so furious that in one jump, he found himself next to it, quickly collected all his swords, and standing on one of them, flew after the monkey and told his comrades that there was danger ahead, only he would pursue. Let them stay in their places and guard the perimeter. He thought, it seems things are not going well. Judging by Fanting's pure strength, dealing with this monster should be no problem for him. But now he, leaving them, the newbies, rushed after it alone. He practices the Thunder Sword technique, which has always been famous for its speed and power, but against this monster it was ineffective. Moreover, this monster managed to snatch their prey right before their eyes. From this, it is clear that this creature is even faster and more agile than the Thunder Sword. This creature is not only fast, but also seems to be able to evade blocking and ignore damage from flying swords. It is difficult to say whether Fanting will be able to catch such an unusual monster. But even if he cannot, then the cat spirit talisman he recently dropped might come in handy here. Meanwhile, Fanting was already almost at the top of the crevice, constantly being pelted with stones from above, thrown by the monkey, hoping to escape pursuit. He gritted his teeth nervously and thought that these rocks were so hard. This couldn't go on any longer. They were constantly getting in his way, so he couldn't pick up speed, which only made the distance grow greater. It was becoming increasingly difficult for him to break through this rockfall. The monkey noticeably moved away from him, which made him uneasy, and then he saw a light and realized that they would soon reach an open area. The monkey threw another batch of rocks at him, and they flew out of a crevice. That's when Fanting caught up with the monster and immediately attacked but missed, which sent him into a wild rage. The monkey nimbly leaped through the trees, dodging every blow, and he cursed thinking that this monster was too agile. If they were on flat open ground, he wouldn't have found himself in such a predicament. Suddenly, a stalk flew at him from the side. He barely managed to dodge it. Seeing a face on the cliff from under which these stalks were growing, he wondered in surprise, "Is this the local beast lord?" Seeing the monkey leaving, he rushed after it without hesitation, but then the beast lord struck him with a stalk. He was forced to block the blow and retreat. The monkey was already very far away. This monster is too agile. It deftly dodges the beast lord's stalks, and his thunder sword technique, although fast, lacks flexibility. It is not suitable for use in such rugged complex terrain. He became extremely nervous. There was no way he could break through this barrier. He led the group with his gold core level and ultimately failed the task. What befits a mentor when he returns to the mountains? How will Zeking and her older brother view him? While he was pondering all this, someone rushed past him at high speed, following in the monkey's footsteps, deftly dodging the beast lord's attack, and Fanting was even surprised by its speed. It was MC. He had used that talisman after all and acquired the agility of a cat. MC had just learned that this monster was called the man-faced ape. It was an extremely rare mountain monster, born the moment a jade flower with a human face ripens. And at that moment it is swallowed by a ghost. Then that ghost grows a new physical body, which is called the man-faced ape. The distinguishing feature of this monster is incredible speed and astonishing agility. The individual that had settled in this valley was precisely one of the monsters that had been waiting here for the flower for a long time. As for those who dared to touch the flower, what it found, it naturally wanted to exterminate them to the last one. However, Fanting's cultivation was far too powerful compared to the creatures here. And in an instant he exterminated all the monsters that had come to encroach on the flower. Therefore, the monkey could only grab the jade flower and immediately flee. And if this one manages to reach its lair and refine this flower, its strength could double, and then it would very well be able to compete for the position of the beast lord here. During its escape, the monkey constantly laughed at the fact that a human could not catch it, and it was very confident in its strength and speed. But things were not so simple. Even after exiting the crevice, the monkey was still being pursued. And just in time, the beast lord woke up and began to attack Fanting. The monkey constantly laughed at him, thinking that this man must be having a hard time now. But when the monster turned around to check, it saw a certain creature quickly rushing towards it and immediately broke into a run. This creature had caught up with a monkey and was now running alongside it, which surprised it greatly. At first, the monkey thought this creature was a ghost, but it was itself a ghost and the fastest one at that, so no one could catch it until now. This creature suddenly approached it, and the monkey was frightened because it was more terrifying than the ghost itself. But it turned out to be only Leon, and realizing it was a human, the monster simply fell into shock. When he licked his hand with a grin, it became even more frightened and even thought he was a pervert. Let's go back 15 ago. The cultivators, having made sure that they would definitely not cause trouble for their older brother, nevertheless, moved on his trail. They noticed the beast lord attacking Fanting, and realizing that there was no further way, they stopped nearby and said, "Apparently, even he cannot catch this demon. Their mission has failed." Thinking the worst-case scenario had happened, MC reached into his pocket saying that since Fanting hadn't succeeded, he'd have to try it himself. Lin Bei asked if even he couldn't catch it, what should he do? MC took out a talisman from his pocket and thought, if Fanting could catch the monkey, he wouldn't have wasted the only talisman he'd received in the White Tower. This feline swiftness talisman, as the name suggests, increases agility, which will help him after activation. As soon as he activated it, a very spectacular transformation began, and he gained super-duper meow power. Without realizing it, he dropped to all fours, which shocked his comrades, to put it mildly. And then, without any difficulty, he jumped to another branch and landed quite deftly. Such was the power of the talisman. The effect was everything he'd expected. Now he would definitely catch up with that escaped monster. Quickly climbing through the branches, he gave chase and finally caught up with the monkey. He smiled, feeling the thrill of a chase. Could it really be that the spirit of a cat was enjoying the hunt so much? It was good that the talisman's effect only lasted for a quarter of an hour. If it had lasted longer, he would have succumbed to its evil influence. The monkey turned to him in panic. Liang jumped onto the monster's branch and licked his hand, thinking at the sight of that monster's frightened face. He simply couldn't contain his delight. The monkey was shocked but burst into tears and ran on, mentally screaming that he was a pervert. Then MC took out his sword and swung it, but the monster's body turned into a ghostly one, and it ran on. Liang followed it and thought, not only does it dodge attacks, but it doesn't even counterattack. Turns out that although this demon is incredibly agile, it's not very strong in combat. Instant intangibility, which allows it to avoid attacks, must be its only innate gift. If so, he should wait until the monster's illusionary state ends, and then it'll be time for a real fight. The monster's physical form finally began to return, and MC immediately threw a rope at it and tied it tightly. The monster thought this man was definitely a pervert. Dying in battle is no big deal, but dying like this is a great humiliation. Seeing this man raising his sword over it, it was terrified, and then Leon's sword pierced the monster. In the cultivation world, it's customary to avoid inquiring about other people's artifacts, talismans, pills, techniques, and the like. The reason is simple. A person's cultivation level is visible to everyone, and if the gap isn't too great, it's difficult to hide. Artifacts, talismans, pills, and techniques can be hidden, and at a crucial moment, they can make up for a gap in strength or even turn the tide of battle. For example, someone who decides to attack a cultivator of a lower level and take all their treasures will immediately flee in fear upon seeing their hidden treasures. As for the origin of treasures, renowned and righteous sects like the Mount Shu school are fine with this, but wild and unorthodox wandering cultivators rarely have a single pure artifact. Therefore, wherever you are, tactlessly asking strangers about their trump cards and their origins is the height of bad manners. That's why Leon shouldn't worry about the talisman he used, revealing the secret of the White Tower within him. Taking the flower stalk, he returned to his comrades, and Jiqing joyfully exclaimed that it turns out he's so strong. He'd never told them anything like that before. Fan Ting was simply shocked by how he managed to tame this monkey, and Lin Bei, remembering how he tied it, hugged the guy and asked with a grin, where did he get such professional techniques? Maybe he could teach him that? Ziqing didn't understand what they were talking about, and Lin Bei awkwardly cleared his throat, saying he meant the movement technique. She found his behavior somewhat suspicious. And MC said, his returning that jade flower isn't really a big deal. He just used a fairly powerful talisman, but it's a pity it's disposable, and he had to use it here. Fan Ting thought, for a cultivator at the initial stage of the spiritual intent level like Liang, such a movement technique is hardly possible. If he had such an art, he wouldn't have hidden it earlier. Most likely, he used pills or talismans saved for emergencies. Ziqing was delighted at this time. Liang is the only disciple at the peak of the silver sword, so all of the master's resources go to him alone. It's only natural that he was provided with some treasures for protection. Lin Bei thought, how expensive must this talisman be for Liang, a level 3 cultivator at the initial stage, to develop a speed far superior to that of Fan Ting, a level 4 cultivator. Lu Ren sighed heavily at this point. Perhaps that talisman was his last resort to save his life. The coins earned from this quest were clearly not enough to cover the cost of such a talisman. Fan Ting was overjoyed and said that he never imagined that at that moment, when the quest was on the brink of failure, he would step forward and turn the tide. And yet, he had decided to use such a precious treasure without hesitation just to help the team complete the quest. This touched them so deeply that they all burst into tears, and MC awkwardly scratched his cheek, asking what was wrong with them. In the eyes of everyone, he appeared as a cultivator of the highest morality, a model disciple of the Mount Shu school. Ziqing said that since he'd used a talisman so valuable, he could keep her share of the reward for this task, which would at least compensate him a little for his loss. Her proposal made him feel a bit awkward, but Fan Ting agreed and clapped him on the shoulder, saying that since he'd sacrificed so much for everyone's success, he couldn't be allowed to lose out, so he'd give him his share as well. Liang felt uneasy, and Lin Bei told him not to refuse. They all saw how much he contributed. He was a hero, so he couldn't be left feeling offended. He'd give him Lu Ren's share as well. And if he didn't, he'd think he didn't consider them friends. Lu Ren was very angry that he decided everything for him, and MC couldn't refuse and accepted the reward. The next day, at the peak of the silver sword, it was early morning. Liang left his chambers and stretched thinking. The master had been absent for the last 2 days, and he felt as if he was the head of the peak and all the power was in his hands. He lay down on the grass to bask in the sun and thought. But even when the mentor returns, he is still the deputy head of the peak. Then he suddenly remembered something important and went to his room. He closed the door tightly and thought with a grin. Yesterday he returned too late. After parting with his comrades from Jade Sword Peak, he immediately went to rest, so he forgot to reward himself properly. He began to meditate and entered the White Tower, after which he immediately used the soul of the monkey to create a new item. A large glowing sphere appeared in front of him. He touched it and noticed that this time it was some kind of special object. This sphere turned into a puppet of the heavenly circle. This puppet is used for auxiliary practice of circulating energy along the heavenly circuit. It consumes 1 chi pill during the day, 2 at night, and can cultivate non-stop around the clock. Any resulting increase in cultivation will belong entirely to the owner of the doll. However, this doll is intended only for auxiliary practice. Using it for other nefarious purposes could cause damage, so he won't be able to use it for cooking, cleaning, and anything else. MC was overjoyed. This was simply a magnificent reward. It's a practice artifact that works 365 a year, 7 days a week. He could already imagine how the doll would train for him while he sat nearby and rested. With this miracle, his cultivation speed would double. He examined the doll from all sides and noted that this puppet was simply incredibly cool, and then a thought occurred to him. The increase in speed won't be easy. Just doubling it. Among the 3 limits and 9 levels, the most important thing in the 3 levels of a heavenly limit is sudden enlightenment. A single moment of attaining the Tao is worth decades of persistent practice. At the 3 levels of the earthly realm, resources are primarily needed with personal practice coming second. But at the lower 3 levels of the human realm, one's own persistent practice is still paramount. At the 3 levels of the human realm, the stage of body tempering is the cultivation of the flesh. The level of chi concentration is the expansion of the dantian and the sea of chi, and the realm of spiritual intent in which one currently resides is focused on strengthening spiritual consciousness. At this stage, growth and cultivation is achieved by sitting in meditation, contemplation, and exercise for months, the so-called practice of the heavenly circle. However, daily practice time is limited. Even if one devotes minimal time to eating, drinking, sleeping, and other daily activities, one can practice a maximum of 16 hours a day. However, this time is spent not only on cultivating true chi, one must also devote attention to the study of spiritual arts. Moreover, Mount Shu disciples need to take on quests to gain practice experience, complete them, and then exchange the resulting sword coins for medicines and treasures to aid in cultivation. So if he manages to devote an average of 8 or 10 hours a day to chi practice, that's already considered tremendous diligence. Lately, he's been running around on quests a lot, leaving him with perhaps only 4 or 6 hours of practice per day, and that practice time must be spent productively. No one will award him cultivation points for simply sitting in meditation and being lazy. But now everything is different. With this big-headed puppet, he can practice 24 hours more each day. Consequently, his cultivation growth can accelerate 4 or even 5 times. And most importantly, he can devote more time and effort to exterminating demons. He took out a pill, stuffed it into the puppet's mouth, and launched it. He used the 9 Heavens cultivation secret technique, the chapter of spiritual intent, and touched the puppet's head. Although their school is famous in the cultivation world for its unremarkable arts, they are stable and reliable. If they persistently practice to the same level, mountain disciples often find themselves one step ahead of others. Now he decided to synchronize this method with this puppet artifact. Once the puppet on the puppet begins to work in sync with him, his cultivation will become doubly stable and reliable, and he will be 2 steps ahead of others. He synchronized the technique, took a deep breath, and confirmed that everything was working. This little puppet took on a different appearance, and he smiled and remarked that it looked cute and thought, after synchronizing the method, the puppet's appearance has changed greatly. Now this puppet, inside and out, has become a copy of him. By the way, what did the instructions for this puppet say? During the day, this puppet uses 1 chi gathering pill, and at night, too, provided with sufficient resources, it can operate around the clock without installation. 3 pills a day, though a small yet significant expense, is an absolute benefit compared to the results of round-the-clock persistent practice. They absolutely mustn't let the dolls stop. At worst, he'll go chop down demon lanterns to feed it, but he's a little wary of the fact that this heavenly circle puppet has no intelligence. 1 pill during the day, 2 at night. Why is the consumption so different? As if it were asking for double pay for overtime. He was outsold by a heartless worker. Simply outrageous. But if this doll were a real person, then he could set an impossible work plan for it. He could already imagine poor little Liang coming to his boss's office, threatening to confiscate his chi-gathering pills, so he could reach the golden core level in 3 working days. But the angel was against it. Doesn't such a squeeze of strength threaten them with demons of the heart? The demon, on the contrary, told the boss not to worry. Little Leon does everything to achieve the plan, works overtime, and contributes to the company. He works overtime of his own free will, so it's voluntary overtime. Since Little Long's overtime was his own initiative, the company wasn't obligated to pay extra for it. His boss agreed and threatened Little Long that if he didn't complete the entire plan by the deadline, he would compensate the company with 1 chi-gathering pill for each day of delay. If he couldn't pay, the company would lose 1 pill, and he would already owe 2. MC laughed at his fantasy. Such luck could only be dreamed of. He decided to leave the doll working inside the White Tower. After all, wealth shouldn't be put on display, especially such a valuable artifact. If you showed it to people, they would immediately envy him. He returned to reality and thought the space inside the White Tower was truly amazing. He still hadn't fully explored it. He only knew that it looked like a storage artifact, but only items taken from the tower itself could be placed inside. He decided not to think about it and went about his business. After completing the quests in the southern region's Mountains of Tranquilization, those disciples from Jadesword Peak thought he'd made a huge mistake by spending the valuable talisman, but he, on the contrary, had gained greatly. Although the spent cat swiftness talisman was valuable, he got it for free, but instead, he received several doses of 100 flower powder, which removes any poison and is very useful for puppets. And on top of that, he had quest rewards from his party members. Including his share, it came to a whopping 50 coins, which is what he actually received for 5 quests. He'd never had so much money before. Since he'd suddenly become rich, he definitely needed to indulge in the high of heavenly realization. He soon found himself in the main square and headed straight to the alchemy hall. He bought everything he needed, and the girl, carefully packing his purchases, said that he was still young, so it would be better for him not to overexert himself, and he thanked her for her concern. Now, with so many gathering pills, he could load a whole box of dolls. After shopping, he went to the sword hall, which was his first stop. He still had coins in his pocket, and now he had the courage to enter such expensive shops. All the walls were hung with flying swords. No disciple could resist the sight of so many weapons. He saw several swords that looked simply magnificent, and he wondered how many coins were needed to buy them, but the price greatly surprised him. He was attracted by the dust-dispersing sword. The main material is Ursa Major Wind Iron, 12 engraved arrays, light and fast. Such a sword costs 300 coins. The Mountain Crushing Sword. The main material is pure divine earth steel, 14 engraved arrays. Large and durable. The price for such a sword is already 500 coins. A Sword of Frosty Air. The main material is 1,000-year-old cold iron. 36 engraved arrays. The weapon is imbued with cold, sharp energy and is priced accordingly. 800 coins. Liang was simply shocked. Each sword was more expensive than the last. He literally felt a wind blow through the store, sweeping away all his dreams. He had never been to the sword hall before, but after he saw Fan Ting's thunder sword, he had a desire to buy at least something. He thought he had made a good fortune since he now had 50 coins, but it turned out that compared to the prices of these treasures, it was very little. Suddenly, he realized that the basic sword bracelet of the Shu Mountains was also quite good. He looked at it with tears in his eyes and tried to convince himself that it was a good thing, one that would last for many years. Typically, a student of the spiritual intent level who frequently completes quests barely earns 100 coins a month, but he still needs to spend on other artifacts, pills, and talismans, for example. So how much would he need to save up to buy at least one sword? He decided to hold off for now. While swords were nice, buying them right now wasn't necessary. He headed for the exit, and the saleswoman, noticing this, immediately ran out from behind the counter and ran toward him, excitedly asking him to wait. She grabbed his clothes and asked if he wanted to buy a flying sword that would be his alone, didn't he? He confirmed this, and her eyes sparkled as she asked what sword he was looking at. He told her he was just looking. He couldn't afford one yet. She smiled and asked him to simply state his budget, and she would help him choose a weapon. He answered her with an awkward smile that he had less than 50 coins, but the cheapest sword he'd seen cost 300. She smiled nervously and noted that the difference was indeed significant, but that was okay. He'd arrived just in time. The store had just launched an installment plan promotion. MC was surprised. Did they really have that in the Shu Mountains now? She said he could make a down payment of 50 coins now and then pay 10 coins every month for 50 months. That's convenient, right? Liang thought about it. The down payment is 50, leaving 250 coins. 10 coins per month, 50 months is 500 coins. So it's not an installment plan, but a loan with almost double the overpayment over 4 years. Yeah. She's not even shy about suggesting that. He told the girl it sounded tempting, which made her happy, but he declined and stepped away from her, promising to come back another time. He headed for the exit and decided to go kill more monsters instead. Maybe they would drop a flying sword. The girl asked him to wait, saying that his first sword was an important step in his life and the cost was nothing, but MC ignored her. At the entrance to the store, he bumped into Ziqing, and they were both surprised to see each other. She smiled and said, "Who would have thought that she would meet him here? Such is fate." He agreed with her and asked if she also came to buy a flying sword. She proudly replied that she had successfully completed her first quest, and her older brother said that, as a reward, he would give her the flying sword of her choice. Liang congratulated her, but not sincerely. A reward from the White Tower must be earned by diligently fighting demons. But a gift from a sibling is much simpler and more straightforward. She asked what sword he had chosen, and he answered with an awkward smile that he hadn't bought anything yet. The flying swords here were too expensive beyond his means. Ziqing decided he needed her help and decisively asked which sword he liked. She would give it to him. He refused and asked, "Is that even possible?" A flying sword was too expensive. How could he accept it? Looking at her determined face, MC was even surprised. This girl truly had a generous heart. But as a sage once said, a woman will only slow down his sword, but a rich patroness can give him a sword right now. Although the ancients wouldn't lie, Ziqing grabbed his hand and exclaimed, "What difference does it make? They are friends after all." He pulled his hand from her grip and said that undeserved gifts are not accepted. Trifles like chi-gathering pills are still acceptable, but such an expensive flying sword cannot be accepted without reason. She didn't object, and he politely addressed her, advising her not to rush into making a choice, as it was time for him to go back. She was indignant that he was still speaking to her so politely despite the fact that he had just said that they were friends. Some guy approached Leon from behind and lightly touched his shoulder, which he didn't notice at first, and Ziqing told him to just call her by her first name. He awkwardly agreed, and then the guy grabbed his shoulder very tightly and measuring him with an arrogant look, asked Ziqing if she was in trouble. He would help her. As he saw, some stranger was bothering her, so he came to her aid. This guy's name was Shang Zhiliang. His friends joined him. They all struck dramatic poses, and he asked if they should get rid of this guy. Ziqing stood up for Liang and said that he was mistaken. He was her new friend whom she met during the last mission. Zhiliang abruptly approached her, which she didn't like, and smiled at her, noting that he had been too hasty. He had to meet Ziqing here. It was fate. She asked if Brother Shine had also come to buy a flying sword. He smugly replied that the day before yesterday, he had led a squad and destroyed a water monster in the Huali River, and his father had said he would give him a new sword, whichever he chose. Ziqing wasn't interested in hearing all this and went to the store, but he immediately blocked her path and asked which sword she had chosen. She irritably replied that she hadn't chosen anything yet. She was just looking. He clapped his hands joyfully and asked, then which sword did she like? He would give it to her. She immediately refused and used Liang's words asking, "Is that even possible?" A flying sword was too expensive. He shouldn't spend so much. He told her that everything was fine. They were good friends, and she again refused, saying that they did not accept an undeserved gift. He decided not to argue with her and offered to have dinner with her that evening if she had time, but she ignored his offer and grabbing Liang by the clothes, quickly led him away saying goodbye to that guy. He shouted after her that she still called him Brother Shang. It was somehow awkward. They were friends, so she should just call him by his first name. She irritably answered him that she understood everything, but she called him Brother Shang again. And then he returned to his friends with a heavy sigh. He struck an impressive pose and asked, "He is such a handsome, noble, and talented young man, and she is always indifferent to him. Is that fair?" They answered him that, of course, it is unfair. And he asked, "So why is she treating him like this?" His friend asked, "Could it be that she already has a lover? Then her coldness towards him would be understandable." He was surprised that he hadn't thought of it himself. And his second friend said that guy next to her was very suspicious. She was clearly looking at him in an unusual way. After Zicheng used the 100 flowers powder in the previous quest, the scent of the flowers still lingered on her. And so one of that guy's friends just now said suspiciously that he smelled the same strange scent on both of them. The very scent that is not spoken of out loud. Zillion was so upset and angry that he clenched his teeth so hard that they all cracked, and then he cursed loudly and ordered them to go and find out what that guy's name was and what peak he was from. He wanted to see who dared to cross his path. Meanwhile, the two of them were walking somewhere else. Zicheng irritably told Liang that Shang Zhiliang, who had just appeared, was the son of the head of Distant Cloud Peak. He always brags about his father being the head of the peak, and he acts like he's incredibly cool, so she never liked him. He's always hitting on her. He's just a disgusting guy. Now MC understood everything. The head of Distant Cloud Peak, Shang Shuwen, is a Confucian cultivator of Mount Shu. He is one of those who left his name on the plaque in the Hall of Nobles and is famous in the martial arts world, but this guy apparently doesn't take after his father. Suddenly, a trail of flames flashed in the sky. Liang saw it and thought it was that limited effect of flying on a sword. Has the master really returned? He said to Zicheng, it looks like his mentor has returned, so he will go meet her. He immediately left, and she waved her hand after him in disappointment. They had only just started talking, and he had already left. MC quickly returned to the peak. His master had already drunk some alcohol and loudly cursed, saying she was fed up with those Pengue brats. Liang approached her and greeted her respectfully, saying he saw her return and came to meet her. She asked if anything had happened in the past 2 days, and he told her he'd gone on another mission and everything had gone quite smoothly. How was she doing? She sighed in irritation and told him not to even ask. She was just looking for any monsters in the Eastern Sea when those guys from the Penglai main sect suddenly jumped out, declared that she was destroying the sea's ecosystem, and kicked her out. If she hadn't been thinking about the well-being of the entire Mount Shu school, she definitely wouldn't have held back and clashed with this so-called number 1 sect under the sky. MC didn't even know what to say. His master's actions were exactly as he expected. Although she casually mentioned that she was looking for demons, given her personality, it's unlikely she was simply conducting a comm search. When demons are causing trouble, Dai Nu Feng can help eliminate the danger. But when there are no demons, she herself becomes a danger. Apparently, she overturned and stirred up the Eastern Sea, which attracted the attention of the people from Penglai, so they came to stop her. The Penglai Upper Monastery is also one of the 9 heavenly gates of the Immortals. Its domain is located right in the Eastern Sea region, and they, of course, could not allow her to commit such outrage on their doorstep. Their actions are completely reasonable and justified. Although the actions of the Penglai Upper Monastery are justified, this does not prevent him from expressing moral support to the teacher. He exclaimed that these people are too ignorant, and she agreed with him. But then she suddenly became suspicious and said that something was wrong with him. Her suspicious and piercing gaze made him nervous, and she noticed that he wasn't usually so obedient. But this time, when she returned, he immediately came to greet her. He wanted something from her, right? He became flustered and asked in response, "Isn't it a matter of course for a disciple to greet his master?" And it so happened that he had a matter he wanted to discuss with her. She knew it, so she chuckled and ordered him to speak. He told her that this time he was on a mission with people from Jade Sword Peak. Among them, there was a disciple at the initial stage of the Golden Core level whose cultivation far surpassed his, and his flying sword and profound arts were exceptionally powerful. And yet he wasn't yet a mainstay of Jade Sword Peak, so he was a little worried. How would they compete with them at the gathering of all the peaks? Nu Feng told him he still had time to become stronger, so he simply needed to believe in himself. Liang grinned. He'd known the master would say that. The head of Mount Shu hadn't allowed his master to take on disciples, not only because he considered her willful, but also because she was a body cultivator. Body cultivators, unlike practitioners of martial arts, use Taoist methods to strengthen the flesh. They don't practice martial arts, but merely forge powerful bodies. The master's body, ablaze with the flames of a divine phoenix, her path to the Tao through flesh cultivation is unmatched in power, and that's undeniable. But body cultivators are extremely rare. They require a confluence of many circumstances, and what she practices is simply impossible to impart to a disciple. However, in addition to receiving abilities from a mentor, disciples of Mount Shu can also turn to the Techniques Hall. That is, if you want to learn an art that your mentor doesn't possess, you can simply buy it there. So there was only one purpose for his visit to the master. He replied that he indeed had time to become stronger, so he was thinking about how to strengthen himself. He believed that in addition to diligent practice and increasing his cultivation level, he needed to learn even more spiritual arts and techniques, and therefore, he would like to ask the mentor to teach him a couple of powerful Tao arts. At first, she was even a little confused and then asked in bewilderment, did he get up in the dark and still sleepy? She was a body cultivator after all. How could she have spiritual arts that she could teach him? He said that in that case, he would like to purchase something from the technique hall, and she gave him the simplest answer. Go and buy it. He knelt in front of her and held out his palms, saying with an ingratiating smile that he was a little short on money. Understanding what he wanted, she chuckled irritably and called him a little weasel. He'd been beating around the bush for so long. Did he really just want to beg her for money? He hastened to assure her that it was all for a greater purpose, and she thought for a second and replied, if he needed pills or artifacts, she could try to get them for him. But money, she really didn't have any. He smiled nervously and asked hopefully, her salary in the Shu Mountains isn't that low, is it? And as far as he knew, the peak leaders have additional funding. This always surprised him. In the memories of the body's previous owner, the Silver Sword Peak always seemed poor, and the mentor taught him that they, Taoists, should be independent of the outside world. Hard times are normal. He'd been used to this since childhood and didn't think anything was wrong. But when he grew up and saw that the other peaks were rich, he couldn't help but wonder. Moreover, there's only one of him at the Silver Sword Peak, and there's no need to distribute resources among multiple disciples. If the mentor gave him at least a little pocket money, he would eventually save up for a flying sword. Nufeng sighed heavily, breaking him out of his thoughts, and said that the peak leader's salary and funding weren't enough for anything. She was now not only penniless, but also heavily in debt. He asked how that could happen, and she patted the jug with a proud smile and asked if he thought wine that could get someone of her level drunk was so easy to come by. It was immortal wine after all. 1 gourd costs 500 coins. MC was simply shocked. He'd watched her drink this wine since childhood, and so 1 gourd costs as much as a flying sword? That's not drinking wine but money. She smiled and said that it was all true. She had nothing but debts now. All these years, wandering the world, besides this phoenix spirit, she never had a single magical weapon or artifact, only her own body. Even if she really wanted to give him money, she has nothing to sell. If it comes down to it, the only thing left to do is sell this body. Leon gave her a thoughtful look and asked with a smile, would she be okay with that? She became very angry and flexed her fists, noting that he was quite a brave guy to say such things to his teacher. He became very agitated and waved his arms saying that she had misunderstood, but she immediately kicked him out and he left the main hall. He wandered sadly through the school kicking stones and recalled her words so that she would quit drinking, save money, and cut back on expenses. In 100 or 200 years, maybe she would think about it. He sighed heavily. His plan to make money had failed miserably. It seemed that now he would have to rely only on himself. To get a flying sword, artifacts, pills, talismans, and even a wedding ransom, he would have to save up himself or not buy them at all, but wait for them to drop during demon smelting. While he was wandering back and forth, Lin Bei was hiding behind a nearby column and waiting for him. He cheerfully waved his hand and said that he had finally arrived. MC was slightly surprised and asked why he was waiting for him here. Did he have some business with him? He ran up to him and excitedly said that he had heard about a very profitable task. They needed 2 disciples of the spiritual intent level with excellent skills, a bright mind, and an outstanding appearance. He immediately realized that no one else on Mount Shu would be suitable. Liang smiled and asked where they were going, and he answered that they needed to go to the city of Yangzhou to the South Mountain Academy. Some time ago, in the city of Yangzhou, 2 guys went to a lake near the city late at night. The guy told his friend that lately no one dared to approach this lake. Why did he call him here at such a time? This is the place where City Yen ended her life. Shalon answered him that they came here to finally sort this matter out. As soon as they approached the lake, the guy suddenly heard a frightening sound behind him, and then footsteps were heard. And he turned around, asking who was there. He looked around, looking for the source of the sound, but everything was already quiet. He tried to convince himself that everything was fine, that it was just evening, and he was scared. Shaoan wasn't the least bit scared. He just stood there. His friend asked, so what was there to finish here anyway? This matter didn't concern him at all. They were the ones who bullied her back then. He had nothing to do with it. Well, maybe he called her ugly a couple of times, but she was already dead. Nothing could be done now. Xiaoan noted that he really hadn't done much, and his friend nervously grabbed his shoulder and asked him to speak more normally. The guy gave him a disdainful look and asked, "Doesn't he still recognize him?" His strange behavior scared the guy, and he immediately hid it from him, then exclaimed, what was he even planning? If that was all, he wasn't gonna stay in this god-forsaken place any longer. He would take his family tomorrow and leave so he wouldn't have to live in fear forever. Xiaoan turned around and asked, "Doesn't he really recognize him?" Seeing that the skin on half his face was missing, he became terrified and fell to the ground with a loud scream. His face continued to peel before his eyes, instilling even more fear in him. When his skin completely peeled off, he finally saw who it really was, that same Situyen. He backed away from her in horror, begging her for mercy, and then started running, screaming that there was a ghost here. He ran as fast as he could, emerging from the forest in less than a minute and finally stopping to rest. He grinned nervously, thinking he'd lost her. But suddenly, as if someone was controlling him, her hands closed around his neck and began to strangle him. He began to choke and beg Situyen for mercy, but she wouldn't let go and sucked the life force out of him, causing his face to become disfigured as well. The boys had now arrived in Yanjiao, and MC said they'd set out on a mission in such a hurry he wasn't yet fully aware of the circumstances. If there were evil spirits in the Southern Mountain Academy, why did they call them? This city, although not far from them, is usually entrusted with strange tasks to disciples from Mount Shu. But the teachings of Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism are separate. The Academy's affairs are supposedly the responsibility of Confucian cultivators, aren't they? He replied that temple affairs are for Buddhists and Academy affairs are for Confucians. They certainly wouldn't trespass. Their task is simply to protect one Academy student. They approached the gates of the client's estate, and he announced that they had arrived. Master Li is a well-known wealthy man in the city. His only son, Li Jue, is studying at this academy. Lately, evil spirits have been infesting the area, and 2 students have already died. He's worried about his son, so he asked the Mount Shu disciples to guard him for a while. Once this strange matter is resolved, their task will be complete. Liang looked at him in surprise and thought, so they're personal bodyguards? He'd miscalculated. He'd only heard about the reward from him, but hadn't asked for details, which is why he'd gotten himself into this mess. It looks like they won't be seeing any monsters on this mission. Limba said the agreed-upon remuneration was calculated daily, which pleased him greatly. As at this rate, he could even save up for a sword without having to slay monsters. The Immortal School often deals with the mortal world, and their offerings of gold and silver helped to meet the school's needs and produce the resources needed for cultivation. If they had seen the exchange rate between mortal and immortal money in his previous world, they would have been astonished. And if the Li family could hire the cultivation school's disciples with gold and silver, that meant they were truly awash in wealth. After some time, Master Li and his retinue came out to greet them, and Lin Bei said there was no need for such ceremony. They were merely junior disciples. He introduced himself and his friend to the man, saying that he was younger than his father, so he wanted to call him Uncle Li and would treat his son as a friend. Master Li didn't object and was only happy. After which, Lin Bei waved his hand to Liang and told him not to be shy and to make himself at home. He noted that the presence of this guy with his outstanding communication skills relieved him of many of the inconveniences associated with communicating with others. His gaze fell on the guy standing next to Master Lai. Apparently, this was his only son, Li Jue. He looked very worried. After that, they went into the estate grounds and Lin Bei, hugging Uncle Li, told him not to worry. His son was under protection. He guaranteed that everything would be fine with him. From today on, they would keep constant watch on him 24 hours a day. He could ask anyone in the Shu Mountains. Everyone knew him. Since he called him uncle, the man also didn't stand on ceremony nephew and said with an awkward smile that he actually had one more tactless request. Even though he was asking them to guard his son, could they do it in a way that no one else would know? Lin Bei asked what that meant exactly, and he told him that tomorrow he would arrange everything so that they could also go to the academy, keep a constant eye on Li Ju there, and return to his home after classes. That's all. But at the same time, no one could understand that they were specifically guarding him. Was that possible? Lin Bei scratched his head in confusion and told him that they would, of course, fulfill his demands. But if possible, he would like to know the reason. Master Li smiled awkwardly at him, said that it was not very convenient to explain, and began rubbing his palms, begging him to fulfill his request without further questions. MC meanwhile was puzzled. He was asking them to guard his son and did not want outsiders to know about it. Why were they being so cautious? The Southern Mountain Academy in the southwestern lands where Confucianism doesn't particularly flourish is one of the few famous academies. Although in its entire history, it has never seen anyone who has placed first or second in the national examinations. They have achieved third place. However, the third-place winner was later imprisoned, and the academy was deprived of some of its glory. Nevertheless, it remains the primary choice for the children of nobles and officials in the city of Yenzhou. And so the next day, a new student named Chu Liang and his servant Lin Bei arrived at the academy. The teacher led Liang into the classroom and introduced him to the other students, then told him to sit in any empty seat and then they would begin the lesson. MC quickly looked around for Li Jue, found an empty seat just near him, and sat there. Lin Bei followed him, but the teacher said that servants were not allowed inside and that he should wait outside. If he wished to study, he could quietly listen to the lesson by the window, but he was not allowed to disturb it. Lin Bei was very upset, casting a disgruntled glance at Leon and leaving the classroom. He then stood at the entrance and began glaring at him. Using a special technique, he mentally asked him why they both came to the academy, but he was a student and he a servant. He assumed it was a matter of charisma, but roles are divided into noble and base. Lin Bei didn't understand anything and said that it was easier to gather information as a servant. Let him socialize more among the servants. Maybe he would be able to find out something about this shady matter. He just sighed heavily. He had to accept his role and sat on the stairs with the rest of the servants and began to chat with them, at the same time, learning about all sorts of rumors. At this time, MC was reliving his school days again. Free time finally came. He stretched and thought that it was so nostalgic. He hadn't sat at a school desk for a long time. He remembered how the teacher scolded him for constantly playing instead of studying and sighed with a smile, how he missed it. He glanced at Li Ju. He was sleeping, so there was no need to worry about him for now, and he decided to walk around, see if he could talk to someone. But just as he was thinking about this, a girl named Li Chingxia approached him and delightedly asked where he was from. He told her he came from Shenzhou, and she asked why he came to this particular academy. He told her that his whole family had moved here due to family circumstances, so he had to come too. She remarked that this academy was good, one of the best in the Southwest, and Leon agreed. He thought so too when he came here, but when he arrived, he had some concerns. She asked what was going on, and then he whispered that he'd heard that evil spirits had been infesting the academy lately. She became wary, started looking around, and then whispered, "It's true, but he has nothing to fear. Only those few hooligans might be worried." And now MC has his first clue. There are 3 hooligans who are connected to evil spirits. Chunxia whispered to him not to tell anyone what she had just told him, but suddenly a guy's stern voice was heard behind her, asking if she was babbling again. She shook her head in fear, and then the guy loomed over Liang's desk and threateningly told him, if he wants to study in peace, then he should mind his own business. Did he understand everything? And suddenly, Teacher Song called out to him and asked if he was growling at everyone again. He nervously turned to her, then immediately obediently sat down at his seat. MC looked up at her, wondering if she was a teacher at the academy. She looked quite young. The teacher approached the sleeping Li Ju, lightly touched his shoulder, and told him to wake up. He opened his eyes, and when he saw her, he was slightly surprised and immediately sat up straight, after which she announced the start of class. Leon noticed how the guy was sitting cheerfully and noted that he hadn't seen this in the last lesson. It wasn't just Li Ju. It seemed like everyone looked completely different from the last lesson. One phrase at the beginning of the lesson and the whole class immediately perked up. Her few words were much more effective than the old teacher's heart-rending shouts from the previous lesson. She noticed him and asked, "Is he new?" Then she needed to introduce herself. Her name was Song Ching-yi. She was a poetry and literature teacher at South Mountain Academy. MC also immediately perked up. There was something special about this teacher after all. As the lesson progressed, he realized that although she was young, she possessed profound knowledge. She conducted all the classes masterfully. She immersed the students in the topic, explained it simply, and what's more, made it engaging. Finally, lunchtime arrived. Liang met with Lin Bei and asked if he had found out anything. He confirmed it and told him that the teacher Song was from Zhongnan. She was also new to the academy. She's 18. About the same age as them, and she's also unmarried. MC didn't get the hint, although he was probably just upset that he hadn't said anything relevant. An awkward silence followed, and Lin Bei cleared his throat and said that he was mostly asking about that strange case. Of course, Leon smiled, glad he hadn't forgotten about it. There are many rumors about a ghost haunting the academy. They say that first, a girl named Sithuan threw herself into a lake behind the mountain because she was bullied at the academy. And 7 days after her death, the bodies of 2 more students were found in the same lake, and their deaths were horrible and eerie. Now rumors throughout the academy say that Situan's soul has transformed into a vengeful ghost and has come to take revenge on those who previously bullied her. MC touched his chin in confusion and remarked, if this was the work of an evil spirit, then it wasn't that difficult. But remembering the behavior of father and son, he still had doubts. Why was Li Hui so scared? Had he really bullied City Yen before? Lin Bai asked. He seemed so quiet. How could he bully anyone? Rather, he was the one being bullied. No? Indeed, that was the scene they were witnessing right now. Xiaohu and his servants pinned the poor guy against the wall and said that he knew what they needed. Li Jue looked down sadly, then pulled money from his sleeve and handed to him, and they finally left. Lin Bei asked his friend if they could help him. Liang decided not to interfere and stepped aside, and Lin Bei asked, was he really going to let it go like that? He remarked, judging by how deftly Li Jue got the money. It was clearly not the first day they had been bullying him. He sat down at the table and opened the food box, adding, if they interfere now, they might inadvertently reveal their connection to him. And besides, they don't know much about Xiaohu yet. They won't create unnecessary problems so as not to distract from the main thing. Lin Bei agreed with him and said that if these guys suddenly pester him, he will respond to them immediately. Suddenly, one of Xiaohu's servants hit him on the head with his palm, but he didn't even feel it right away and was perplexed. While he was trying to comprehend what had just happened, Xiaohu approached Leon and asked if today was his first day, so he didn't know the rules of the academy. He inquired about what rules he was talking about, and the servant answered him. To live here peacefully, you need to pay 5 long of silver every month as a contribution. His master will protect him. Lin Bei was shocked because 5 long of silver is a lot. This amount would be enough for an ordinary family to live for several months. Even if the children of the South Mountain Academy were from rich and noble families, this was still blatant robbery in broad daylight. He became so angry that he scattered all the food and slammed his palm on the table, breaking it, and exclaimed, he would rather go and rob. The servant immediately slapped him on the head and exclaimed, he doesn't agree with this. So what if he broke the stone table? Why is he showing off like that? He should first find out who his master is. Lin Bei looked at him furiously and asked, was it he who slapped him on the head? He would destroy him. Before he could do anything bad, MC asked him to calm down, then took out 10 line of silver from his pocket and handed it to Xiaohu, saying, since this is the rule, it must be followed. He will pay for 2 months in advance and then let him look after him. Xiaohu really liked this. He hugged him and remarked that he was a smart guy. He could be sure of it. From this day on, he was his brother at the academy. If he said his name, he would walk like a king, fearing no one. Liang remarked that Xiaohu's brother was formidable and magnanimous. But outside the academy in the city, could he also cover for him? The servant told him not to doubt it. His master was the heir to the Black Tiger Gang. He could find out about them. Their gang was affiliated with the Whale Gang. He understood what that meant, right? Once he became friends with his master, the whole city would be at his feet and he could do whatever he wanted. MC smiled and apologized to Xiaohu for not immediately recognizing the heir to the Black Tiger Gang, and he smiled smugly, saying that he was a smart guy and that he liked him. After that, he left and parting words. If anything happened, he would say his name and protect him. Liang wished him a safe journey in return. And when they finally left, Lin Bei scratched his head in irritation and said, those people may have martial prowess, but they're no stronger than even a body tempering level practitioner. He would have killed them in a matter of seconds. So why did he stop him? He replied that while the situation was unclear, they wouldn't look for trouble. It seemed like the Black Tiger Gang was a local force here, and if they suddenly attracted the Whale Gang's attention, the mission would be more difficult. They needed to scout things out first and then act. Lin Bei didn't object, but he felt bad that they hadn't yet received their payment for the missions. Having already spent 10 laying of silver, MC suggested he simply ask Master Li for the money later, and he thought about it. The Whale Gang, also known as the Four Seas Whale Gang, is one of the 10 earthly gates and is the only force among the earthly gates and the 9 heavenly immortal gates that is neither a martial art school nor a sect. Yet it is ranked among the immortal gates. This speaks for itself. The whale gang commands tens of thousands of people across all the seas and oceans. The gang has already captured river transport, the wharf, and many other industries, making it a true giant. And if the Black Tiger gang is really connected to the whale gang, then it's no wonder Xiaohu is so arrogant. However, first he needs to see how Li Ju is doing. He was already sitting in class waiting for the lesson to start. Liang sat down next to him and asked, "Is he okay? Should they deal with that guy?" Li Ju shook his head and refused. He had long been accustomed to this. He should move away from him so that no one would suspect their connection. MC didn't object and headed to his seat, and Li Jie quietly added he didn't care about him anymore. After all, he didn't have much time left. Liang turned to him and asked what he meant. Li Jie was nervous, thinking he wouldn't be heard, and didn't respond coherently. MC realized it had something to do with that evil spirit. The whole day passed without incident, and after class they went home. Lin Bei said he'd learned something today. This is the Black Tiger gang, which calls itself part of the whale gang, but in reality it's just affiliated with them. Apparently, they want to exploit their reputation, but the whale gang has never interfered with their affairs. In Yenzhou City, they are indeed considered a large gang. They have several dozen cultivators, mostly first-level practitioners, and a few second-level hall leaders. Only the gang leader is a third-level practitioner. Liang thought to himself, in a place like Yanjiao, such a force is quite sufficient for lawlessness. After all, having a permanent force and mercenaries are two different things. For example, Master Li can hire a spiritual intent-level practitioner for a few days for a large sum of money, but he can't afford to keep them on a permanent basis. Besides, the disciples of Mount Shu School always advocate justice. They usually only handle matters involving the elimination of evil spirits and offer no support beyond that. But a gang that can constantly maintain several dozen cultivators ready to carry out any order, especially with third-level practitioners, that's truly a considerable force. But nothing more. He looked around and Xiaohu caught his eye, and he was very happy. He waved happily and asked with a smile if anything had happened. He liked MC so much that he even wanted to take him on as a junior assistant. And then he asked, didn't his servant tell him to find out about the Black Tiger gang? So he went and found out everything. Xiaohu became slightly nervous and asked what he was going to do, and Liang threatened him by telling him they would get their money back. Meanwhile, Chang'e walked out into the main courtyard and saw students running around and watching something with interest. She immediately realized they were fighting. She ran up to the crowd, asking what was going on, and ordered them to stop immediately. Because they were all crowded around the fighting boys, she couldn't see what was going on, so she pushed through them, asking who was there. One of the students told her that Yan Xiaohu and the new student were fighting, and she immediately sternly ordered Xiaohu to stop. How dare he run and beat up a classmate? Shouts came from the center of the circle. The teacher became worried and asked the students in front to clear the way for her, but the shouting continued. And then she couldn't hold back and shouted loudly that she was warning him for the last time. If he didn't stop immediately, she would ask the principal to expel him. Her gaze was very stern. The students immediately moved aside, and when she saw what was happening in the center of the circle, she was very surprised. Xiaohu lay beaten on the floor. He pitifully told her that he had stopped a long time ago, and he had never even dared to hit back. He had been beaten to such a state, and she still wanted to expel him. She was very surprised. After all, he was the local bully who harassed his classmates every day. As soon as she heard that he had fought with someone, she habitually thought that he was the one beating someone. But he has combat training in his family, and he always drags two fighters, sycophants, around with him. Who could have beaten him so badly? Finally, she turned her gaze to the two guys next to him and was even more surprised. These guys are kneeling with their heads down and holding their ears. Are these his fighters? And where did the one who beat him go? Not only did they start a mass brawl on the academy grounds, but they were also trying to escape the scene. She looked back and ordered the guy who had just beaten him to come out immediately. Liang and Lin Bei were hiding in the crowd at the time chatting, but the other students treacherously moved aside, which meant they no longer had cover. And when they met the teacher's gaze, they both froze in fear. She measured them with a displeased look and asked, did they do this? MC turned to the crowd with a nervous smile, wondering why the students of the Southern Mountain Academy were so accommodating. He bowed to her and humbly apologized. He'd only just arrived today, and this guy had demanded 10 lien of silver as protection money. If he'd violated the Academy's rules by resisting, he'd humbly accept the punishment. Jingji didn't know what to say. Before the words of reprimand had even left her lips, his words had already blocked her way, preventing her from opening her mouth. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. And she said that no matter what, fighting was not allowed in the academy. He replied that he'd simply wanted to pay him money to cover it up, but his servant had gotten too furious and started a fight with those three. So he definitely punished him severely upon returning home. Lin Bei was very surprised. Leon looked at him, asking him to play along, and he, pretending to be in pain, began whining and saying that it was a fracture and that he needed to go to the doctor immediately. MC became worried and asked, "Is it that serious?" He turned to the teacher and said that he needed to take him to treatment immediately. Otherwise, they might be late and his arm would have to be amputated. Although she was angry, she still let them go and then turned to the other three and warned them. Tomorrow, when they came to the academy, she would ask the director to punish them. On her orders, all the students dispersed. And when the three left the academy grounds, Xiaohu lost consciousness and the servants decided to take him to the infirmary. But Liang and Lin Bei caught up with them. The two immediately ran up to them and grabbed their ears, causing their master to fall face first onto the floor. And MC, smiling, told them not to strain themselves so much. He wants to say that although today was entirely their fault, they are not reckless people. He extended his hand to Lin Bei and asked him to give him 1 coin, after which he handed it to them and told them to give it to their leader and say that this is the payment for his son's treatment and they should personally deliver it to their leader. They were so scared, but they did not dare object and immediately ran away, leaving Xiaohu there. Lin Bei called out to them. They forgot to take their young master. They immediately returned, picked him up, and ran away. After that, Lin Bei asked why he gave them the coin. He answered him that it was to avoid unnecessary trouble in the future. If you beat the younger, the elder will definitely show up. But when Xiaohu's father sees this coin sword, he is unlikely to come to them. Lin Bei understood everything. But why did he give them his coin? He answered him that it was because he would still need it. They returned to the estate. Li sat at the table thinking about something, and MC stood nearby leaning on the door frame. Judging by what he had heard today, Li Ju used to be a diligent student, but something had happened to him recently. He was constantly pacing. Noticing him, Li Jue became slightly frightened and asked why he hadn't warned him he was coming. Liang placed 5 long on the table and sat down, saying that this was the money they had taken from Xiaohu for him. He didn't have to give it back today, and he probably wouldn't have to in the future either. Li Hui smiled and thanked him. He had seen how they had taught him a lesson today. MC said with a smile that for a cultivator, upholding justice and helping the weak was a matter of course. But he still wanted to clarify one question. Why did he say back then that Xiaohu didn't have long left? Li Ju immediately became nervous and decided to remain silent. Liang asked, "Is it because of Sithuan?" He replied that he knew nothing, but MC was sure he knew everything. It's because they once bullied Sithuan, right? Li Ju became angry and jumped up from his seat, telling him not to ask him about it anymore. Leon pointed out that his father had paid the Shu Mountains a lot of money to hire them to protect him. The longer they were here, the more he spent. It would be better for them if they dealt with this matter quickly. He paused for a moment and asked, "Is the vengeful spirit killing Situ Yen?" The guy thought for a moment and hesitantly confirmed it, and MC asked, "Then why is he so afraid of her? Because he bullied her too?" Li Ju immediately shook his head, denying it. He had never bullied her. Liang asked, "Then who are these people?" He grabbed his head and then named them.
Song Kong, Vu Xiaohu, Chen Da.
They were the ones who constantly bullied City Yen. Then Li Jue told him a story. City Yen was an ordinary girl, not a beauty, but from a wealthy family. She lived in abundance. This would have been enough for a happy life. But 2 years ago, a large fire broke out in City Yen's house. She managed to escape the fire but burned half her face, leaving a permanent scar that cannot be removed. Ever since City Yen's face became disfigured, her classmates from Ganga's class were afraid to look at her. Although she covered her face with a veil and grew thick bangs to cover the left side, it was still impossible to completely hide the scar. Several unruly classmates began to bully her constantly, trying to force her to leave the academy. Zhang Kong loudly called her ugly every day. Wu Xiaowen often threw paper balls at her. Chengda, knowing that she had a strong fear of fire since then, often scared her with burning straw. Yan Xiaohu demanded 5 taels of silver from her every month. Situan wanted to give up and not go to the academy anymore, but it was then that Li Jue supported her. All her classmates either bullied her or were afraid to even look at her, and only Li Jue treated her truly well. The silent Li Jue and Situan, who had become withdrawn after the burns, seemed to feel a kinship. He encouraged Situan to come to the academy boldly, helped her make up for missed classes, and when bullies bullied her, he stood up for her. Although he often ended up being the target of bullying himself. Before Situan was burned, they were just acquaintances. But after the burns, they became close friends. Li Jue thought he could gradually help Sicilian regain his composure. But one day, while they were reading books together by the lake, he unexpectedly fell asleep. When he woke up, he discovered that Sicilian had tied him up. By the time he realized something was wrong, the situation had already taken a turn for the worse. Situan pulled out a small knife and pointed it at Li Ju, a frightening glint in her eyes. Situan said she had already fallen in love with him. All she had to do was cut up Li Ju's face, make him ugly, and then they could be together forever. Li Hui tried to reason with her, but Situan, hysterical, completely ignored his words. She only wanted to turn him into an ugly creature. Fortunately, he struggled desperately and finally managed to free himself before her knife could reach him. He pushed Situan away, called her crazy, then turned and ran away, not daring to look back. The next day, he learned of Situan's drowning in the lake. He was at a loss. He didn't know whether he was right or wrong or why. Despite his sincere concern for her, he had received such payment or whether his offensive word crazy had been the last straw that made her give in. 7 days later, the bodies of Wu Xiaoyan and Zhang Kong were also found in the lake. The academy's inhabitants whispered whether Situ Yan's wrong soul had returned to seek revenge. Li Hui thought the same thing. She had definitely returned, and everyone who had wronged her would receive retribution. But he didn't know whether he himself would become one of the victims of Situan's revenge. Li Hui was very afraid. After listening to his story, MC silently left the room. Lin Bei was waiting for him and asked what was going on. He told him that since the deaths of Zhang Kong and Wu Xiaohan, Changde had no longer appeared at the academy and had been holed up at home all this time. Yan Xiaohu, however, was behaving as before, but he was also unlikely to be able to leave the house for the next 2 days. If Situ Yan had turned into a vengeful spirit, then most likely she would appear at the lake behind the academy mountain. He would go there to check, and he should stay and keep an eye on Li Ju. Lin Bei said that he would keep an eye on him, but he was worried. He was going against the vengeful spirit alone, so he should be careful. He told him not to worry. She had no spiritual powers in life, and even if she had become a vengeful spirit, it would not be difficult to deal with her. He would not hesitate and would leave right away. He went out into the courtyard and thought the light from flying on the sword was too bright. Since he was going on reconnaissance, it would be better to use flight on the wind without unnecessary special effects. Having risen into the sky, he quickly found a lake and headed towards it. Very soon, he was already there. He landed nearby and continued on foot. The oppressive silence of the night and the barely perceptible rustling of leaves, such an atmosphere is very suitable for the appearance of evil spirits. He reached a place with a view of the lake and decided to hide in the thicket for now and conceal his aura. He would calmly wait for the snake to crawl out of its hole. He heard quick footsteps and the rustling of fabrics. He cautiously peered out from behind a tree, then used spiritual perception, and his energy rippled through the area and touched the man. He saw a woman's outline and immediately rushed to the attack, deciding that Sitian had appeared. But when he ran to the place, no one was there. He scratched his head in confusion and thought that even if it was a ghost, it couldn't just disappear, and there was no trace of energy around. Strange. Sounds came from the treetops. He looked up, and at that moment, a swordswoman attacked him. Fortunately, he managed to block the blow and exclaimed, "Who is this?" The woman didn't answer him. He saw that her weapon was a jade ruler, and then she retreated, and he thought her strength is about his level. But the quality of the jade ruler is undoubtedly far superior to his flying sword. Besides, the blow just now was full of righteous energy, not like an evil spirit. Now he finally got a good look at her face and was very surprised. It was Teacher Song. Qing Yi was also surprised to see him here. And Liang put away his weapon and looked at her more closely, noticing significant differences from how she looked during the day. Then her breasts didn't seem to be of such a majestic scale. They had grown so much in just midnight. It was truly strange. She put away her weapon and walked up to him, and they simultaneously asked each other if they were cultivators. This was unexpected, and they both fell silent for a second and then asked the same question again at the same time, causing Qing-yi to become angry and tell him to stop repeating her. He offered to let her speak first, and she said that she had immediately suspected something was wrong with him. So where did he come from as a cultivator? He replied that he was a disciple of the Shu Mountain School and had entered the South Mountain Academy. In fact, he had been invited to protect one of the academy's disciples. She responded by saying that she was from the Hall of Nobles in Jingnan. The evil spirits in the South Mountain Academy were the business of their Confucian school, and they should resolve it. Simply fearing to scare away the snake, she did not dare act openly. So she entered the academy disguised as a teacher. Now it was no surprise to MC that this teacher song was so young, and he said, "This matter really doesn't concern the disciples of the Shu Mountains, but he has already taken on the task and must complete it. Since she's here, does that mean she also knows about the Citoyen matter? He just received some information, which is why he came to the lake behind the academy." She told him that she had been keeping watch here for the past 2 nights, but nothing happened. Just today, she saw some shadow sneaking around and decided to attack. She hoped he wasn't offended. He called it a trifle since their goals coincided. It would be easier to solve this mysterious matter. Maybe they could exchange the information they had? She asked what exactly he wanted to know, and he said that he was interested in something. Did she wear a compression bandage around her chest during the day? Otherwise, why was there such a difference between day and night? She became a little nervous and told him that she was afraid that it would look inappropriate during class. Suddenly, she realized she didn't have to explain it to him at all, and indignantly exclaimed that if he had nothing relevant to the matter, he should leave. He apologized to her. He was simply curious. He decided to get back to the matter at hand and ask. She examined the corpses of those 2 students, didn't she? Was this really the work of a vengeful spirit? She said the deaths were horrific with a thickening energy, so it was likely that an unholy creature had killed them. But she thought it wasn't just a vengeful spirit but something of a higher order. Liang considered her assumption. Vengeful spirits have low intelligence. Their thinking is unclear, and they usually appear in the same place frequently. Their obsession is strong, but they are incapable of complex actions. Luring 2 students away from home to the lake and killing them, a vengeful spirit is incapable of such a thing, except perhaps by chance. An ordinary person without cultivation has very limited soul power. Even if the grudge is deep after death, the most they'll gain is a slightly stronger vengeful spirit. If anyone could become a ferocious demon with unlimited power, the world would be teeming with powerful spirits. Higher-ranking spirits either continue to gain strength through luck and cultivation after becoming a spirit or already possess strength and a powerful soul in life. Without a doubt, the recently deceased Scythuan clearly doesn't fit these criteria. He noted that Scythuan was an ordinary girl without cultivation, and Qin-yi agreed. Most likely, the murders were committed by another demon or a demonic cultivator was involved. Some demonic cultivators deliberately recycle resentful souls, turning them into tools or weapons for their cultivation. Such methods are inhumane. Take, for example, the currently thriving Netherrealm sect. They have numerous techniques based on the souls of the dead. MC then told Qin-yi a little about Li Jue's case, but didn't mention his connection to Sichuan. He only named the students in the class who could be targets for Sichuan's revenge. Perplexed, Qin-yi repeated their names and promised to check on the 2 tomorrow. Among the 9 heavenly and 10 earthly gates, there are only 2 Confucian sects. One of them, the Ascending Dragon Academy, relies on the imperial court and cultivates talents based on the knowledge of the entire Yu dynasty. The other is the more independent Hall of the Nobles. Originally, the Hall of the Nobles in Jingnan was founded by several great Confucian scholars. They often gathered in the smoky rain tower to discuss science and exchange knowledge, and news of this spread widely. Then someone suggested naming the place the Hall of the Nobles. Since then, the Hall of the Nobles has become an honorary pantheon of Confucian teachings. Anyone who was recognized for their virtues, knowledge, and strength could leave their name in the hall, to pass it on to posterity and immortalize themselves for centuries. Countless students of Confucian teachings consider inscribing their name in the Hall of the Nobles the main goal of life. Over time, the Hall of the Nobles in Jiangmen acquired its own traditions and became one of the 10 earthly gates. Returning to the estate, Liang told his friend about what had happened and said, since the affairs of the academies are handled by people from the Confucian school, they probably shouldn't worry too much. Lin Bei didn't object and repeated Confucian school several times, lost in thought. Then, due to the similarity of the words in Chinese, he blurted out Kung Fu Titsi in school, causing his face to immediately turn red, and he became lost in his fantasies. MC immediately showed him a yellow card for such thoughts and said, not to mention that Teacher Song might beat him with her jade ruler if she found out verbal taunts are punishable by a fine. The next day, during the academy's midday break, the three of them met in a side room. Ching Yi brought them grim news. Chengde had died. The two were surprised, and she told them the details. After finishing morning classes, she went to visit Chengde's student at his home under the guise of a teacher, and ended up seeing a gloomy and hopeless scene in the Cheng family. The atmosphere was eerie, making it immediately clear that Chengde's death was unusual. According to his family, after the death of Zhang Kong and Wu Xiaoyan, Chengde locked himself in his room and was afraid to go out. He only opened the door when his parents brought him food. Last night, his father went to bring him dinner and saw Chengde's mother entering the room with a tray in her hands. He was surprised because she herself had asked him to bring the food, but now she suddenly carried it herself. However, when he returned to his room, he realized something was wrong. Earlier, Chengdu's mother, lying in bed, asked him to bring dinner, and now she was still lying in bed and did not go anywhere. Chengdu's father immediately sensed something was wrong. He ran to his son's room again and saw him lying on the floor, all black from burns, clearly burned alive. But there was no smell of smoke or signs of burning in the room, and Chengde did not let out a single cry. And just like that, in an instant he was burned out of nowhere. She checked. The yin energy was thick, the work of evil spirits. Liang said Chengde's mother, whom father saw entering the room, was an illusion created by a demon. Demons capable of assuming the appearance of others are not many. Lin Bei noted that illusions that change appearance are not difficult. Many evil spirits can do this, but transforming into a specific person at will is much more difficult. MC confirmed this. In addition to the great art of 1,000 transformations, there are also unique racial talents. For example, those of foxes or ghosts. A thought occurred to Lin Bei. He excitedly slammed his fist into his palm and exclaimed that it could be a ghost with painted skin. Liang agreed, and Ching Yi thought about it and said, only ghosts with painted skin can freely assume the appearance of others. Those two disciples were most likely also deceived by such a demon and lured to the lake. But how could the recently deceased Citoyenne become a powerful ghost with painted skin? If she wasn't the killer, then why did the ghost kill exactly those she wanted to take revenge on? Ghosts with painted skin constantly change appearance. Their traces are undetectable, and they are 100 times harder to deal with than vengeful spirits. Noticing her frown, Lin Bei told her with a smile not to worry. They, the disciples of Mount Shu, always considered it their duty to drive out evil and protect righteousness, and they would definitely help them. Night fell. MC was sitting in his room enjoying hot tea, and Lin Bei was nearby, very nervous. He began to tear his hair and asked him to finally think of something. After all, it was precisely because of his intelligence and resourcefulness that he was taken on this task. Leon responded that it was he who was throwing around promises in front of Teacher Song. Why was he involving him? Their task was simply to keep an eye on Li Ju. Right?
Lin Bei exclaimed.
But doesn't he want to see the sweet smile of the teacher? He replied that he only wanted to beat monsters. However, ghosts with painted skin are extremely dangerous, so it must be eradicated as soon as possible. Not to mention the identity of this ghost, its actions follow the path of revenge against Citoyenne. In that case, they only need to guard its targets, and they will eventually catch it. He will look after Li Hui, and he will go look for Xiaohu. He stood up, and Lin excitedly stopped him and asked why he was leaving again. Last night, he left and accidentally met Teacher Song. Tonight, he wants to go himself. MC said that he can uncover the ghost with painted skin, but can he? Lin Bei realized that he couldn't handle it, so he retreated and asked him to buy him food when he returned. Soon, Liang was already at the gate of the Yang family's house. He knocked, and a disgruntled servant looked out at him, asking why he was so late. If he doesn't have an invitation, then let him go. MC smiled and handed him 5 lien of silver and asked if the young master was home. He was his friend and had come to visit him and inquire about his health. The servant accepted the money and immediately became friendly. He smiled and asked why he hadn't told him he was his friend right away. He was sorry, but he had had bad luck today. Their young master had gone out to have fun. Leon was surprised. He had been beaten so badly yesterday. He thought he hadn't gone to the academy because he was nursing his wounds at home, but it turned out he had already gone out to party. Apparently he really was in good health. He inquired where exactly he had gone, and the servant whispered. He apparently didn't know their young master very well. He had, of course, gone to the colorful moon tower. The colorful moon tower is the largest pleasure house in Yenzhou City, a favorite meeting place for local scholars and literati. In this world, pleasure houses are different from the places we're accustomed to in the modern world. In the modern world, there's something simpler, specializing exclusively in carnal pleasures, usually small and located in secluded places. Like the spider's house he destroyed last time, this place was in a remote place outside the city. Pleasure houses, on the other hand, emphasize art. They're larger, and their role as a social gathering place is more pronounced. Usually, girls there simply join in over drinks and watching performances. Of course, if you insist on something else and the girl agrees, then why not? However, famous, unattainable beauties are very difficult to reach. Even after spending a lot of money, at best, you can only get an invitation to a conversation at the table. Achieving a deeper understanding is not so easy. On the stage of the main hall on the first floor of the colored moon tower, several girls in transparent capes dance to the accompaniment of musicians. The guests downstairs sit at tables in groups of 3 or 5, eating and listening to music in the company of pretty girls. On the second floor are private rooms, each hidden behind thread curtains. The third floor is reserved for private rooms, frequented by either the very generous or the shameless. Yan Xiaohu is undoubtedly both generous and shameless. Just entering the pleasure house, Liang headed for the stairs where a woman approached him and said with a smile that she hadn't seen him here before. He wanted to go upstairs and call the girls. He politely replied that he was simply looking for someone. Is young Master Yan Xiaohu upstairs now? She smiled and discreetly waving to the servant, leaned close to Liang and asked, so he's his friend? He should wait, and she would have him escorted out now. She thought that this young man was handsome, well-mannered, and polite. It was clear that he wasn't the type to start a scandal. It's a pity she never met such handsome, stately men when she was younger. The servant escorted him to the third floor where a guard stood outside one of the rooms. The servant asked Nyang to wait so he could go ahead and report his visit, but he declared he would go in himself. He approached the guards and told them he was his classmate, and they threateningly told him to leave. The young master ordered them not to let anyone in. MC clenched his fist and politely threatened to force them in. Meanwhile, Xiaohu was sitting in a group of girls, but he wasn't interested in them. He was waiting for his one and only Miss Ruoi. One of the girls nervously replied that she was currently talking to someone and would be back soon. Xiaohu was very dissatisfied. From start to finish, he had spent several thousand land of silver on her. Couldn't he expect priority? He was already upset that he'd lost face at the academy yesterday, and now he'd come to have fun, and they were telling him he had to wait. He raised his hand, saying he was in a foul mood, and the girl was afraid he'd hit her. But at that moment there was a crash. The door swung open, and guards rushed into the room. Xiaohu asked angrily who it was, and the guards, with all their might, told him that he'd insisted on barging in, and the two of them couldn't hold him back. Xiaohu glared at the man in the doorway. Because of the light behind him, he couldn't see him clearly and began to act aggressively. But when he realized it was Liang, he went into shock. The day before, when he was brought home, he fell at his father's feet, begging him to avenge him. But when the servant handed his father the sword coin, he shuddered and called his son a fool. He shouldn't mess with people like that, and he shouldn't even think about revenge. Xiaohu immediately became humble and friendly. He greeted Brother Chu, who pointed to his guards saying that he had come to check on him and had been told to get out. Xiaohu indignantly exclaimed that this was so tactless of them and ordered them to get out of here. The girls were shocked. Yan Xiaohu was considered the most unruly little tyrant in Yenzhou. Why did this handsome youth inspire such fear in them? Xiaohu kindly offered Brother Chu the main seat, and he found himself between the girls. Seeing his smile, they blushed and thought, a young man with such a beautiful smile can't be a villain. Right? He suddenly pointed to the window saying that someone was there. And while they were distracted, he quickly hit each of them with a gold bar, which made Xiaohu nervous. Their Yen clan could be considered an expert in both cards and pleasure houses. He had accompanied his elders to dens of vice since childhood and had seen all sorts of devices. But a gold bar, he had never seen such a thing. What kind of addiction does he have? MC told him not to worry. They were fine. They were just dizzy, but he was in danger. Did he understand that? Xiaohu became nervous and realized that as long as he was here, he really was in danger. Liang told him that Qingda had died last night. Of those who had bullied Situan, only he remained. Perhaps Situan had become a ghost with painted skin capable of taking on other forms. Anyone who approached him could be her. Xiaohu was surprised. He'd heard rumors before that Situan had turned into a vengeful spirit, but he paid them no mind. He practices martial arts himself, is guarded by masters, and an ordinary ghost couldn't reach him. But if this is the legendary ghost with painted skin, then killing it, a simple first-level warrior, is a piece of cake for him. Brother Chu, no matter how dangerous he is, will only beat him up. And if this is an evil spirit, then his life is at stake. He fell at Liang's feet and tearfully begged him for help, to which Liang replied, he just came to save him. He suspects this ghost has already set its sights on him, which is why he came to visit. He has a way to distinguish ghosts with painted skin. He must check anyone who approaches him tonight. Xiaohu agreed and pointed to the girls, asking him to check them quickly. He glanced at the bumps that had appeared on the tops of their heads after his blow and said that, in fact, he had already done so. There was a knock at the door. MC immediately grabbed the two and hid behind the screen with them, and Xiaohu allowed the man to enter. It was the woman who had greeted Liang at the entrance. She said that Roy was already in a hurry. It just so happened that an official had made an appointment with her, and he had just arrived when he entered. They opened the doors for trade. They couldn't kick people out. He would have to wait a little. She approached him and said that as soon as Roy finished with that guest, she would come right away. He recoiled from her in fear, telling her to sit where she was and not approach him. She smiled and said that they had known each other for so many years, and he was still so cold. MC already had the ingot ready. He quietly came out from behind the screen, and the woman said that she guaranteed that he had definitely sunk into Miss Roy's heart. He was missing the day before yesterday, and she secretly asked her about him. His face immediately turned red, and his heart felt warm. Liang at this time quickly moved behind the concubine, and she asked, where did those two girls go? Whom she called to serve him? Where did those stupid girls disappear to? Xiaohu smiled nervously, saying that she would see them soon, after which MC hit her hard on the head. She was not a ghost either. Xiaohu dragged her behind the screen and asked, why did he even wait here for this ghost? He could just go home now, gather people, and protect himself. Isn't that an option? He answered him that it was an option if he was ready to never leave the house again. Only fools steal every day, but it's impossible to defend against thieves every day. If the ghost with painted skin isn't caught now, he'll always be in danger. Is that okay with him? Xiaohu didn't object anymore, and suddenly there was a crash outside. The two guards rushed into the room again and apologized to the young master. They simply couldn't hold her back. He was simply furious. He was the local king himself, and today he was also in league with Brother Chu. Now he would see who dared to pick on him. Turned out to be Qing-yi. She entered the room with annoyance and asked, does he even understand how much danger he's in? And he's still fooling around in a place like this. She immediately fell silent, seeing the unconscious concubine, and asked, what kind of obscene thing are they doing here? Xiaohu immediately shifted the blame to Liang, and he, awkwardly coughing into his fist, said he simply thought that a ghost with painted skin might try to get to Xiaohu, so he came to protect him. She sized him up, then looked down at the unconscious concubine and looked at him with hostility. MC excitedly said that he was just checking to see if they were ghosts. Fainting was just a minor side effect. She peeked behind the screen and was even more surprised, and Xiaohu quickly kicked the guards out and awkwardly asked her how she got there. She told him that she had also come to protect him and asked Liang if his method of testing them, by any chance, was to knock them out first and then see if they would fight back. MC even felt a little upset by her words. Ever since he came down from the mountain to exterminate evil spirits, for some reason, people constantly took him for a pervert. He was used to it. There was a knock at the door. The two hid, and Xiaohu plucked up his courage and told the newcomer to come in. Roy poked her head in, greeting him with a smile, and he was overjoyed. He had finally waited for her. She asked if he was angry with her for being late. Was he? He scratched his head awkwardly and embarrassedly and told her that all his anger immediately went away when he saw her. She sat down next to him and said that she knew that only he truly loved her and cared for her, unlike other nasty men. He felt awkward, still remembering the ghost, and so asked to sit with his back to the screen. She laughingly remarked that he was acting a bit strange today, to which he nervously replied he just wanted to look straight at her face so he could see her more clearly. She moved to the screen and he saw silhouettes behind the screen, noting that she was much more visible that way. They both peeked out from behind the screen, ready to attack at any moment. And Joey asked, "It's not a day off today. Why isn't he at the academy?" He glanced at Liang, remembered how he beat him up, and lied to her that he just didn't feel like going. She smiled and asked. He himself said that the new teacher's song at the academy was half as beautiful as she was, and that she made his heart ache every day in class, and now he's suddenly too lazy to even look at her? Men are all like that. They play around and then quit. He became very agitated because Teacher Song was there, and he began to deny everything, asking Joe not to say such nonsense in the future. She was a little confused but didn't object. And then she saw the bruises on his skin and worriedly asked, "Is he injured? How did this happen? Did he fight with someone?" He lied to her again, saying that he really had a fight, and she extended her hand to him, saying how she felt sorry for him. She had never seen him injured. The one who hit him was just terrible. She would curse him. He threw a frightened glance at Liang and worriedly asked her not to say that. She sat on the table and said irritably that he was right. There was no point in bringing it up. This man was probably having a hard time as it was. After all, he himself said that his father said, "Whoever dares to touch him either begs for forgiveness on his knees or says goodbye to his entire family. Otherwise, he will not calm down." She was really scared. He waved his arms, exclaiming that nothing like that happened. His ancestors had been law-abiding citizens for 6 generations in a row. She stared past him in bewilderment, and when MC approached her from behind, Xiaohu closed his eyes as if further words would be difficult for him and asked the girl to be patient. It might hurt a little. She laughed and noted that he was pestering her again, and then Liang hit her and she lost consciousness. He asked with a gloomy expression, "So this is how ambitious the Yen family is?" Chun-Yi asked with an unkind grin. "So does that mean his heart aches during her lessons?" He became very nervous and looked away, denying everything. After which, there was another crash outside. The guards rushed into the room, shouting at the young master that he had broken in by force. They couldn't hold him back. He was simply furious. This was happening for the 3rd time. He ordered them to pack their things and get out of there. Tomorrow they won't be working as security. But as doormen at the tavern, they should be able to handle the customers there. Lin Bei ran into the room and told Leon that something bad had happened. Seeing Chang'e, he was surprised to notice how crowded it was, and MC asked how he got here and who was watching Li Jui now. He told him that he had disappeared, which left the two perplexed, and he told them everything. He had been waiting outside, and there was no sound inside for a long time. It seemed strange to him. He knocked, opened the door, and then looked. The window was open, and Li Jui was nowhere to be found. Liang asked if he heard anything suspicious. He replied that there were no suspicious sounds or energy fluctuations, and he thought he had quietly escaped. But why did he need to do that? MC suggested that maybe he was hiding something else from them, and he could also be Satuyan's target. It was unknown where he had gone. So what should they do now? Chun-Yi said she would try to find him, and they asked doubtfully if he could really do it. She replied that using the Confucian method was enough. She took a piece of paper out of her pocket, used a special technique, and wrote Li Hoi's name on it. Then she waved her hand, and the piece of paper flew out the window. Now all they had to do was follow it. Liang pointed to Xiaohu and said that someone should stay and keep an eye on him, and Lin Bei resolutely volunteered for this role. After that, they jumped out the window. The guy looked at Xiaohu with confusion, and he awkwardly asked, "What should they do now?" Lin Bei thought for a few seconds and suggested that they order food first, and then they would wake up the girls and continue the music and dancing. Xiaohu asked, "Is that right?" The danger had not yet passed. He patted him on the shoulder and told him not to worry. He was right there. Although Li Jui, whom he had been keeping an eye on before, had just gotten into trouble, it was a pure accident. He was sure that this time everything would go well. This made Xiaohu nervous. Meanwhile, they were still on the way. MC noted that her artifact was so convenient. It was enough to know the name, and it turned out that there was no one in the Celestial Empire who could not be found. She answered him that this was not entirely true. Her powers were not enough for that. She could only track within the city of Yanjiao and its environs. He remarked that this was already remarkable, and she added, "This half-page of the Golden Book, the protective artifact the mentor had given her before this quest, has many miraculous properties, but she hasn't fully mastered it yet. Lan thought that her mentor was so kind to her, and as tears welled up in his eyes, he wondered why he was so sad. However, it was still the rules of their school. Unless a student is outstanding or has accomplished a great feat, receiving an artifact as a gift from a mentor is a great rarity. It's the same on other peaks, not to mention their meager silver sword peak. But in other immortal gates, it's quite common. Moreover, Confucian schools value scholarship and morality more highly, especially in the Hall of Nobles. Qing-yi may not have the most outstanding cultivation abilities, but in the Hall of Nobles, she could very well earn the mentor's respect thanks to her scholarship and high moral character. They flew to the lake, saw Li Hui on the shore, and decided to watch from afar for now. They quietly landed behind him and hid while he reproached himself, asking why she killed so many people. He was the one who drove her to the grave, so shouldn't she have killed only him? Why continue to kill others? MC frowned, realizing that he was definitely hiding something. Li Joy burst into tears and said that day she tied him up and wanted to slash his face. He was scared to death, desperately resisted, and accidentally pushed her into the lake. Then he was so scared and shocked that he thought of only one thing, to quickly run home. A long time passed before he remembered that by falling into the lake, she could be in danger. But when he ran there again to check, he heard that someone drowned in the lake. He didn't mean to, but he really did cause her death. All these days he was very afraid and he kept running away from this thought. But now he doesn't want to run anymore. He called her loudly and asked her to come to him. If she really became a ghost, please let her not kill anyone else. Liang thought this means that Li Ju directly caused Situan's drowning and she didn't jump into the water herself. No wonder he was so afraid. All this time, he was tormented by the guilt of unintentional murder and the fear of a ghost thirsting for revenge, so he experienced incredible mental anguish. It seems that today, he finally couldn't bear this torment and came running here. But he has been standing here for quite a long time, and nothing unusual is happening. Li Hui began to look around and asked if she was not here, or if she simply did not want to appear. If she did not respond, then he would go down there himself to atone for his guilt. He entered the water. Qingyi became worried and ran toward him, but MC stopped her and suggested she wait a little longer. Li Ju was already waist deep in the water. He plucked up his courage and dove in, and Qingyi told Liang to let her in immediately. At that very moment, they felt streams of energy. Situan had arrived. A stream of energy rushed toward the lake, dove underwater, and reached for Li Jue, and then was thrown out of the water with a powerful push onto the shore. He cleared his throat and asked, "Has she finally arrived?" The streams of energy gathered in one point. An image began to grow from them and a physical body appeared. Seeing her, he burst into tears of happiness and said that she had finally arrived. MC thought, such a dense aura of yin qi, this is definitely not an ordinary vengeful spirit. And besides, her clearly defined figure speaks volumes. Although he doesn't know what happened that allowed her to gain such power, he can say for sure. Situan is the ghost with painted skin. Lidra told her to do what she wanted, then he would not suffer so much anymore. She said that she was not angry with him and would not kill him. He was confused and began to persuade her, and then she yelled at him, ordering him to leave quickly. He became worried and asked what was wrong with her. Her hands trembled. Demonic energy flared up, and she grabbed her head as if trying with all her might to stop what was happening to her. She ordered Li Jui to run away immediately, and then the demonic energy completely took possession of her.